America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Get my sheet out before I start up the meeting. Oh, I don't have it. All right, we're going to move on then to roll call by Sarah is filling in for us again this week. Welcome back to Monday night.
Thank you. Commissioner Shaw?
Here.
Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilson?
Here.
Commissioner Stanley? Here. Mayor?
Here.
Thank you.
All right, and then we'll move on. Any announcements from the city manager?
None this evening.
Okay, great. And any announcements from the deputy city clerk?
Oh, please. Meetings scheduled this week are the Planning Commission will have a special meeting on Tuesday, August 20th at 6 p.m. here in the chambers. The Arts Commission will meet this Wednesday, August 21st at 3:30 in the committee room. The Riparian Buffer Committee will meet Thursday, August 22nd at 4 p.m. in the chambers. And just a reminder that the next City Commission will meet on Tuesday, September 3rd because of the holiday. And after just a community update, after a 2-year plus process, the Planning Commission will discuss the Master Plan and Mobility Action Plan at their special meeting on August 20th and consider adoption by resolution of the plan.
Thank you. All right, and then we're going to move to City Manager Vogel to introduce the governance training kickoff that we have coming up.
Thank you, Mayor Shamro and City Commission. Good evening. We are kicking off our governance training this evening. I will not reread for you the memo that I sent, but joining us remotely, we have Jen Ferguson from Barry Dunn, who will be one of our facilitators in this process. Can you hear us, Jennifer?
Yes, good evening. I can hear you.
Good, thank you. So Jen has a very brief presentation, and then she'll be able to answer some questions, and then we'll talk about scheduling. We'll talk a little bit about the survey that we're going to be asking staff leadership and the commission to fill out, as well as signing up for your one-on-one sessions. Take it away, Jen.
All right, thank you very much. I was just wondering if there was someone in the waiting room. Michelle Kennedy from Barry Dunn is also joining us, if that's a possibility to let her in.
I don't see anybody. We don't have anybody in the waiting room right now.
Okay, well, let's get started. To keep you moving forward, I have a short presentation to share with the commission tonight. Can you all see that slideshow?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All right, thank you. It's nice to meet everyone, albeit virtually. I'd like to cover a brief overview about our strategic plan readiness and governance training kickoff. Short agenda here from introductions. We'll do just an overview of what the readiness and governance training might look like, talk about our project approach and phases, schedule and timeline, and then happy to answer any questions. So Barry Dunn is a management and IT consulting firm. We're headquartered in Portland, Maine, with regional offices across the U.S. We were founded in 1974. We're celebrating 50 years, and 38 years of that time has been serving the public sector. Our local government practice group has a number of practices that assist city governments with operations, their processes, as well as strategic initiatives. On our Barry Dunn team, there are a number of individuals who have been part of getting us established with Traverse City. Seth Hedstrom is our principal. He handles the engagement. I'm Jen Ferguson. I'm serving as your project manager and lead facilitator. Michelle Kennedy is a facilitator, and Madison Spencer is our research analyst. A little background on myself. I spent about 30 years in local government, serving communities in Minnesota and Washington State in senior executive leaderships, covering strategic organizational development, strategic planning, finance, economic development, to name a few functions that I serve those communities in. Michelle has over 30 years of strategic planning, facilitation, and consulting. She is a bright star in our organization, and she leads many strategic planning engagements. And Madison Spencer is a senior consultant with the firm as well, and she's going to be serving as our research analyst, and she would be helping if we need for some of our stakeholder interviews, as well as helping to put together documentation for our deliverables. So just a brief overview about our strategic planning readiness. What we want to do is position the city for success with the strategic planning process that is upcoming, that you'll be working with Future IQ on. Readiness helps to determine how capable the city is of undertaking a strategic planning effort and whether additional capacity is needed. It requires a broad sense of sponsorship, careful management, effective coordination. Certainly luck comes into it, and we want to make sure that your process is not at significant risk of achieving its intended outcomes. The governance training piece is planned to help guide the city commissioners and city leadership for a successful strategic planning effort. We'll be talking about definition of roles, responsibilities, and those relationships, understanding the commitment that's necessary, and then managing the planning process. So essentially, planning to plan and setting expectations. In that workshop that's scheduled for later in September, we'll focus on strategic planning readiness assessment that we'll be conducting. We're going to be addressing strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges to ensure that you see a successful strategic planning outcome. So our project phases include where we started back in August for project initiation and management, and that is the background work that goes into managing a project. From August now, where we're starting, to September, we'll be working with City Commission and department heads on engagement, that stakeholder engagement. And then the governance training and readiness assessment is planned for September, and then we'll end the project in early October with a handoff. We do anticipate coming back to work with Traverse City on performance management and implementation planning, and that's anticipated next year around March through December for long-term performance management and action planning. So our first phase is that project planning and management. That includes our developing the schedule, looking at documentation and data, developing project documents, presentation materials, and orienting the city project team. We have been conducting our weekly project status meetings on Mondays. The stakeholder engagement phase includes a distribution of readiness survey, and that's something that City Manager Vogel, I believe, has sent to all of those stakeholders, and so you may have received that information already. We'll be working with you all on interviews, fact-finding interviews, with both city commissioners and department heads, and then we'll be developing that readiness assessment memo, and we'll be presenting it to the project management team for finalization. And the final phase is the governance training and the readiness assessment. That's where we will be on site. We'll facilitate that governance training workshop with city commissioners. We'll present the readiness assessment memo. Part of this phase also then includes a post-training workshop, and then we'll be attending a joint session with the city commissioners and Future IQ to transition from the readiness phase to your strategic planning process, and then again transitioning back after your strategic planning process is complete into implementation planning. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions.
All right, commissioners, I think we're all well mic'd. Does anybody have any questions for Jen? No, it's very intro, so. Go ahead, Jackie.
Was the survey link sent?
I have it ready to click send.
Lovely, thank you.
So that will go out later this evening, and all the commissioners and the staff leadership will have that survey ready to go in their inbox.
Thank you. Any other questions at this time? All right, I'll pass it. Liz, I don't know if you want to sign off or?
That's it. You'll be getting an email shortly from, probably from Kim Sheridan, so we can schedule those virtual options and those in-person options. Those will take place after Labor Day, but August is quickly passing us by. So you'll also be getting an opportunity to schedule those pretty quickly here, so look for that email as well.
Great. I think we're all set then. Jen, did you have anything else you want to say in closing before we cut the electronic cord here?
Nothing more, just have an enjoyable evening. I look forward to meeting with you all soon.
Thanks. All right, and we'll hand it back to Liz now for our update on the housing and homelessness partners here.
Yes, one moment, please. My agenda. Thank you. We have a number of individuals here who have joined us tonight to give us an update on the work that we've been doing over the spring and summer on housing and homelessness. And I'd first like to introduce Dave Mingabeer from the Community Foundation and Sakura Takano from Rotary Charities. Thank you for coming this evening.
Thanks for having us. I'm Dave Mingabeer, the President and CEO of the Grand Traverse Regional Community Foundation. The Community Foundation work on housing and homelessness has been ongoing for the 3+ decades in our existence as a regional philanthropy, and often in partnership with Rotary Charities. In addition to providing millions of dollars in grant funding to nonprofit and public housing organizations, our organizations have made a $2 million commitment to low-cost financing available for attainable housing through the IFF Michigan Housing Fund, and among other things, advocated for a $5 million earmark to area public, parochial, and private schools for teacher and school personnel housing, and through the Northwest Michigan Community Development Coalition, working collaboratively with state agencies and regional nonprofits to ensure rural northern Michigan municipal governments have the policy tools and funding they need to bridge the gap in housing availability. More recently, in response to the seasonal closure of Safe Harbor, our organizations work with other funders and donors to raise $51,000 for bathrooms, hand washing stations, and charging benches at the Pines.
Good evening. My name is Sakura Takano, CEO of Rotary Charities. Thank you for having us here tonight. Rotary Charities has been in the homelessness and housing sector in the 5-county region. We've been providing supportive funding and resources for over 30 years, in excess of $3.5 million, supporting the construction of the Goodwill Inn, Third Level Youth Shelter, Catholic Human Services Host Home Programs, Safe Harbor, services at Jubilee House, basic needs services at the Pines, and most recently East Bay Flats. We have a current grant of $150,000 to support an initiative to end chronic homelessness in the Grand Traverse County region. I'm also the former Director of Housing and Homeless Solutions at Goodwill Northern Michigan, and bring information and experience related to street outreach programs, veterans homelessness programs located in Gaylord, also youth homelessness prevention programs, as well as supporting a new structure for the coalition to include the voices of people experiencing homelessness in the solutions. It's very near and dear to my heart. Some of our great successes include Carson Square and also Brookside Commons, which are similar permanent supportive housing developments like the ones that you have supported with Annika Place and Ruth Park. So thank you for that support. After a lot of heated stakeholder input in winter of 2023 about a potential memorandum of understanding between city, county, and service providers around adding year-round shelter capacity, Dave and I offered to convene a key stakeholder group to restart those discussions around ending homelessness and providing homeless solutions, identifying common goals, and sharing information. We've been meeting since April about once a month, and I'm going to just show a list of the participants in these convenings. Key stakeholders include ourselves as conveners, Rick Bellingham, who is an independent consultant who has supported us with facilitation, as well as the Northwest Michigan Coalition to End Homelessness, homeless providers like Safe Harbor, Goodwill Northern Michigan, Michigan, and also the area faith-based organizations like Grace Episcopal Church, Jubilee House, and Central United Methodist Church have most recently been involved. We have representation from the police department, and the city of Traverse City have had various staff attend, as well as county police quick response team. As you can see, the number of organizations is extensive, and it has included consistent participation from various neighborhood associations, like the Boardman Neighborhood, the Commons Village Neighborhood Association, and also Central Neighborhood, as well as other community providers like the library and the Housing Commission as well. It has been a, I would say, really progressive set of meetings where we were really trying to establish a set of understanding around what we were trying to focus on, bring some commonality and some common language to those meetings. Our ground rules were really focused on intentional trust building. So we created a space that was focused on one meeting so that issues and discussions would be held at that meeting with those joint partners all involved. We also focused on letting people complete their thoughts and to have the shared respect of the room as they were sharing their perspectives and experiences. And we also asked everyone to come to the meetings and to listen with curiosity and asking questions for clarity. Our purpose of that meeting, as we all got together, was to really develop a way to have a shared understanding of our desired end state, of the different solutions and perspectives around homelessness and housing in our region. We also wanted to keenly identify the problems that we wanted to solve and the critical issues that were keeping us from getting where we wanted to be. Facts around homelessness and housing numbers specific to our region were shared. Also, information from the quick response team was shared. Lots of information, questions, data were presented at these early meetings. A way for us to gain more information was to have surveys that were conducted between meetings anonymously so that people could very openly share their thoughts, their perspectives along the way. And those surveys helped us determine a couple of different things. One of the first things that we looked at was what were our desired end goals and the end states. And so what you're looking at here is information around different components around our issues around homelessness and housing and where the participants and key stakeholder groups felt our most urgent and important needs were. And in this chart, you'll see that people were focused on shareholder coordination and collaboration, that people and the stakeholders also believed that safe, secure, long-term housing was an area of a focus, and that we wanted to have a data-driven approach. So having an understanding of the factors and solutions around homelessness that were data-driven, informed, and also based on best practice. We also talked about the problems to be solved and what those critical issues might be along the way. The top concerns here, which you may not be surprised by, is that people expressed a need for more year-round night shelter beds and higher capacity for coordinated day services. There was also an identified need for more housing for people to move into so that they could exit homelessness. There were different safety concerns that were voiced by neighborhoods, also through the experience of law enforcement and other providers that were trying to serve the population. And it was unanimous that the Pines is not appropriate nor safe for people who must live there, for the providers, and for law enforcement. One of the issues that also came up was that the capacity of and staffing of different providers was already very stretched and not really capable of meeting the need that we have. So with these 6 meetings, I would also like to share that we weren't just meeting to meet. What it did was it allowed for those discussions to happen in a space where people could openly speak, and also for collaborations to occur along the way, because we knew that there were going to be multiple solutions that would be needed. Some of those accomplishments where the city and other funders working together to meet the immediate safety needs and basic hygiene needs at the Pines. Dave mentioned that funders were able to come together to support $51,000 to support the facilities that are there now, with the city contributing the rest of those funds. The city and funders also supported the redevelopment of East Bay Flats, providing the funding to support the housing-based case management services needed for those new folks moving into housing, as well as a gap in funding before the MSHDA low-income housing tax credits would be put to work next summer. So once again, thank you for the support on that. And to date, we will have more information, but we can say that 22 people experiencing chronic homelessness were housed at East Bay Flats, and we'll have more of an update on that in a little bit. We also were able to increase our engagement between service providers for more coordination and outreach, and also the Coalition to End Homelessness and various stakeholders at that table were able to provide resources and expertise to inform the city's own CDBG 5-year plan. So we were really excited to bring that table together so that there could be increased dialogue flow for both nonprofit and service providers, as well as helping to inform how the city might approach homelessness and housing for the longer term. So with that background on our convenings, I would like to pass the microphone over to Ashley Halliday-Schmantz, who's the Executive Director of the Northwest Michigan Coalition to End Homelessness. And she's going to provide an update on what's working well and what we see as necessary steps to move forward. So, Ashley?
Oh, cool. Thanks. So first of all, I'd like to thank Liz and the commissioners for inviting us tonight, and just for the importance that not only we as providers and stakeholders in this community feel, but that you all feel, for us to have a safe and inclusive community where all people have housing. So we appreciate that and all the work that you've done right alongside us. I was ready to say next slide, but I do it. So this is just a really high-level overview of what the coalition does. When I say the coalition, I do mean all of the providers that are doing work to address and end homelessness in our community. When I say like me, I'm talking about doing these things. We have a staff of 2.5 folks doing this. So the way we get state and federal funding to address and end homelessness in our community is because we have this jurisdiction called the Continuum of Care. I oversee that Continuum of Care and direct the state and federal funding. And then I also get to measure, do some analysis and accountability on all of the programming that our community does that we get funded to provide. And then at the coalition, we oversee the vision, strategy, and policy for the work to address and end homelessness in our community. And this is what everybody else does. This is a really nuanced and complex work that the providers in our community do to address and end homelessness. This is our look at a homeless response system. It's very simple looking here, but it's pretty complex. And inclusive of many providers throughout our community. What I really want to point out, though, with this is we've been studying this for years. We've been trying to figure out how do we refine this and make sometimes small tweaks, sometimes big tweaks on how to make this better. How do we get more people out of homelessness and into housing quicker? And what we're finding year after year is that in a given year, about 80% of folks do this with really little help from us. So 80% of a homeless population in a given year is able to self-resolve or resolve with a little bit of assistance. Maybe they stay in a shelter for some of that year. Maybe they interact with our outreach teams or mobile medical units while they're experiencing unsheltered homelessness. But by and large, most people can resolve homelessness with a little bit of help. The 20% that can't are who we're focusing on with this presentation and our work to end chronic homelessness. These are just some of the providers that make up the homeless response system, not inclusive of everyone in this community that does work or touches folks who are experiencing homelessness. Sakura's list was much more inclusive of that. These are kind of the 5 components of a high-functioning homeless response system, and these are the entities in our community that provide those things, anywhere from accessing services, which is our call center. The Community Action Agency does that. Goodwill provides street outreach, so it's kind of like a mobile call center and housing navigation support. We have 3 temporary emergency shelters, the Goodwill Inn, Safe Harbor, and Women's Resource Center. We have shelter diversion in place, which is a program that's really helping that 80% of folks get out of homelessness even faster. So really targeting people who have been homeless for the first time, get out quickly. And then we have housing with supports, which I'll talk about tonight. And that's primarily permanent supportive housing, and that's done by Northwest Michigan Supportive Housing, Goodwill Northern Michigan, and the Northwest Michigan Community Action Agency. I think Chief and Jen will talk more about the unsheltered population and kind of a status update on the Pines tonight, but in terms of just general numbers, we have about 250 people at any given time experiencing homelessness in our 5-county region. Most people are in Grand Traverse County, and then of those 250, about 70 are chronically homeless. They're not the same 70. We have people leaving homelessness and leaving chronic homelessness every month, but we have people becoming chronically homeless at the same time. This is just a visual look at that. Every month we measure how many people are entering homelessness, how many people of those are homeless for the first time. So in July it was 43. 7 were returning, and that doesn't necessarily mean returning from permanent supportive housing. That could have been they stayed with their aunt for a while, and then that didn't work out anymore, and now they're back into homelessness. So 7 returning, 43 new. And then on the flip side, we housed 22 folks, and 13 of them went to inactive placement, meaning we lost touch with them. They might have went into a long-term care facility, jail, or that sort of thing. But what we show this, or why we show this, is we need to have outflow bigger than inflow every single month to make real progress. Looking at a snapshot of 1 month sometimes does look really good because the 35 is bigger than the 50. But we have to keep doing this month after month after month. Why we have more people coming in than we have leaving, I don't think is a surprise to anyone in this community, because homelessness is a housing problem. If we don't solve for housing, we can't solve for homelessness. Our friends at Housing North did the housing needs assessment, I believe 1 or 2 years ago. At that time, our community's rental vacancy rate was lower than 1%. A healthy community would be somewhere between 5 and 8%. And then our vacancy rate for deeply affordable units, meaning units for folks experiencing homelessness, or between 0 and 30% of the area median income, was 0. So that's pretty dire. That means we had no one moving into or out of deeply affordable units. So at the time, we knew we're going to have to invest in building and acquiring units, not just, this isn't a problem of allocating like our resources better. Those are already maxed. We need the units. So it's our first ask, or the first time I'm going to ask you tonight. How can we improve our community's homeless response? Like I said, we've spent years and years trying to perfect the nuances of the homeless response system. We've partnered with philanthropy, community folks, people experiencing homelessness, and we're kind of tapped out. Where the resources are being allocated to the people who need them the most. We just need more. And we need a comprehensive plan from both the city and the county to address and end homelessness with the specific focus on chronic. And I'll be more specific in a minute. So I think I've given you all this presentation before, but we're looking at about 70 people experiencing chronic homelessness in our community, meaning they're homeless for a year or longer, have a disability, and their life expectancy is 40 rather than around 80 or upper 70s for the general population. These are the folks who are most likely to die on the streets, more specifically in the Pines, if we do not intervene with permanent supportive housing. Here we're talking really about how homelessness cannot end without housing. So if we take an example of someone living in the Pines who has severe and persistent mental illness, who also might self-medicate that severe and persistent mental illness with substances. Let's say that one day they have a psychiatric episode and Jen and her team find them and get the mobile crisis unit out there, assess them, and get them into inpatient psychiatric care. They put out the crisis of that moment. And the person stays 3 to 4 days in psychiatric care, and then they're discharged, but there's no housing, and there's no housing unit. So then they go back to the Pines. And then the next day, they decide, oh, I need to fill my prescription, but that's all the way across town, and I can't get there. I'm just not going to fill it. I'm going to use some more, because that's easier and that's available, right? People are trying to survive. So they use. And then they get into an altercation with the police. And then maybe they serve some jail time. And then at the discharge of jail, there's still no housing. So they're back to the Pines. And then this time, maybe they use and they fall down and cut their leg open. And then they go into the hospital. But there's still no housing. So then they go back to the Pines. And then on and on and on and on, unless there's housing. When there's housing at the end of that, the things a lot of the things in the middle go away, and we don't have to spend as much time and capacity and effort solving for addressing homelessness when we're housing more people, where they're stable and they can get those supports that we have in this community. I'll give you one more example of this because it speaks to the Housing First method. So providers across the coalition practice from a Housing First perspective or philosophy. Housing First does not mean housing only. Housing First does also not mean we're anti-supports while people are experiencing homelessness. We're not. If we're serving someone experiencing homelessness and they say, hey, I want to go to treatment today. Great, let's get you to treatment today. And then we'll work with your treatment providers to do a discharge plan that isn't back to the streets. Usually that's the perfect scenario, right? We have the unit lined up and all of that. That doesn't always happen. However, what Housing First does say is that we are going to work on all of those things that make it really impossible to stay well while you're on the streets after you get into housing. That stuff is way more effective after you get into housing. And the example I use to kind of put it in perspective, imagine you're out on the bay and you're in a boat. You're looking out across the water, it's a gorgeous day, and you see someone drowning. And they're, doing what this guy's doing. They're, struggling, they're in crisis, they're panicking, they don't know what to do. Your first instinct is probably not from your boat to yell at them and say, have you ever tried swimming lessons? I hear the Y has a great program. Here's a number. No one's going to do that, right? You're going to rush over to them, grab them, put them on your boat, get them stable, get them safe, and then a week, 2 weeks, a month later, then when the trauma has kind of subsided, you can say, hey, if you thought about that swimming class I mentioned, then maybe the brain can work through that a little bit different. They're not in crisis, and then maybe they're more open to trying the things that will keep them from drowning. So same thing with homelessness. When people are in crisis, when they're on the streets, just trying to survive till the next day, it is almost impossible to expect job placement and treatment adherence and things like that. They can work, they can have jobs. Folks can have jobs while experiencing homelessness. They can engage in treatment services. The effectiveness is just far greater when they're stable and in housing. Another reason to focus on the chronic population with our work is that it's cost effective. It costs us about $2.5 million a year to maintain 70 people in chronic homelessness in our community. And these are real numbers from providers in this community. We compared them against national averages, and they're the same. Munson spends over $1 million a year just on homeless, chronically homeless folks. Our TCPD, our ambulatory services, our fire, all of that stuff is overutilized by people experiencing chronic homelessness while they're on the streets. The reverse of that, it costs less than $1 million to maintain those 70 people in housing with the supports and the rental subsidies they need to stay housed. So our biggest challenge, I mentioned that earlier, having access to the number of units we need. We have some set-aside units, we have some zoning practices that can help us there, but we need more landlords, we need more units. We need more funding for rental assistance. If we had the $360,000 to kind of bridge that gap for the folks at East Bay Flats, we would have done it, but we didn't, and we had to come to you all. Most of our funding is already tied up in that same exact thing. Most of the funding that we get from the state and our federal partners at HUD is tied up in permanent supportive housing. So these are the things that you all have already helped us to do, and we're forever grateful. In the last iteration of the strategic plan, housing and homelessness was on there. It's huge. Approval for the pilot at Annika 2, the pilot at East Bay Flats. I know I'm missing some other pilots. Rental assistance for East Bay Flats, we'll talk about that in a second, and then passing the CDBG 5-year plan. So East Bay Flats, it's on everybody's mind. It's a huge accomplishment for this community. It's a huge accomplishment for Goodwill, Northern Michigan, and more specifically, a staff member, Nora Dunlop at Goodwill, who helped us get a tax credit deal that I did not think we would even have a shot at in the first round, and we got it. It's unheard of for a community like ours doing something as unique and specific as East Bay Flats. So kudos to them. What East Bay Flats will be is 64 units for people experiencing homelessness. 26 of the 64 will be dedicated to folks experiencing chronic homelessness. We don't fill up all 64 with high need people because it's just not best practice. You want to have a mix of need, a mix of income within a building. All the units will eventually come with rental subsidy and support services. Right now, as Sakura mentioned, 33 units are being occupied by people who are formerly homeless. Of those, 22 were chronically homeless. 12 of those were staying in the Pines prior to moving in, and 13 are receiving rental assistance from the city funding. So I just want to take a minute there and thank all of you for doing that. Those are 13 people who will not die on the streets because of that funding, so thank you. Now, what we're looking toward in the future. Like I said, we're making great progress. I think since January of last year, we've housed high 60s, I think 68 people experiencing chronic homelessness in a year. Some of that has come through these significant investments, but most of it has come through prioritizing that work and making sure we're serving the people with the highest need. Some of you have mentioned this to me, this Houston article, how Houston housed 25,000 people from the streets into permanent housing. We've been looking at this model. We're already doing a lot of what this model is talking about. What we're not able to do is take it to the scale yet for our community size. Another model that's working that I'd encourage you all to look at, and it's kind of part of our ask here, is from Santa Clara County. Santa Clara County, California, although heavily backed by tech, so forget about that part, developed a collaborative plan from representatives of community-based service organizations, government, philanthropy, businesses, healthcare, and people with lived experience to have a 5-year plan with these 3 strategies. So if you saw these 3 strategies and didn't know it was about Santa Clara, I could have told you, I think it could have been from Traverse City. Strategy 1, address the root causes of homelessness through system and policy change. You've already funded interventions like QRT. to get at the root of that. Strategy 2, expanded homelessness prevention and housing programs to meet the need. Like I said, we still need to scale up. We still need to meet the scale of housing development in our community. And then improve the life for unsheltered individuals and create healthy neighborhoods for all. And if that doesn't speak to what our community is going through right now, I don't know what does. So this is a great plan. Like I said, it's heavily funded, so forget that part. I think we can make it replicable here. And then I'll end on this ask. So we'd love to see what we're doing with our partners in philanthropy taken to the next scale. We have city leadership at the table, we have county leadership at the table, but we'd like a formalized plan that is signed on by all of the folks that we mentioned in Sakura's slide, some of the folks that I mentioned on this last slide, that really gets at the specifics of what we need to do to address and end homelessness. So meaning, how many shelter beds do we need? Who's going to fund it? Where's it going to be? How many street outreach workers do we need? Who's going to fund it? What do we need? How many permanent supportive housing units, and so on and so forth. And we're happy to partner with the city on that. And with that, I will hand it back over to you guys. Thanks.
Thanks, Ashley. So next we're going to hear from Chief Matt Richmond, who's going to give us an update on public safety, the Pines, and the QRT.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Ashley and Sakura. Good evening, Commissioner Matt Richmond, Chief of Police, Traverse City Police Department. Like Dave said, I'm just going to give a quick update on what's happening in the Pines from a law enforcement perspective, and then I'll turn it over to Jen Holm, our police social worker, and she can touch on the QRT and the good work that that's doing. So currently in the Pines, basically 800 South Division Street is a call for service address there for the Pines. There's approximately 87 people residing within the Pines right now, with another 30 that kind of frequent the area. So they may stay there one night, not the next night. They may visit, but they leave. So it can fluctuate between 80 to 120 people within the Pines on any given day. Calls for service, so I'm going to go basically from May 1st through August 15th. So May 1st, the first day that Safe Harbor is closed, we've responded 126 times to the Pines. That's already surpassed last year's number from May 1st until October 14th when Safe Harbor opens. A good thing with that is probably approximately 23% of that is self-initiated calls for service by our department, most of it by Officer Friesinski, who's out there every single day that she works. So a lot of those are property inspections where she's checking out there at that location, walking through the Pines, developing that rapport, developing that trust with those individuals that live within the Pines. Additionally, there's 14 calls for service on the Women's Trail, so north of 11th Street, 10 at the intersection of 11th and Division. Now, whether these are actually Pines related or more traffic related, but it's within the area. And then 7 at Veterans Park there on 11th. One thing to note with the Pines is when Safe Harbor is open, we still responded 91 times there during October 15th through April 30th of last year. So there is approximately 20 to 30 people that stay in the Pines all year long. So that would collaborate that or corroborate that. Some other numbers, arrests in the Pines. Since May 1st, we've arrested 5 individuals on 8 different charges, ranging from felonious assault, arson, non-aggravated assault, R&O, and obstruction of justice. Citations within the Pines, we've issued 17 citations. Most of those are for garbage and rubbish and protection of trees. There's been a couple citations for camping outside of those designated areas. Should be noted that all 17 of those individuals were given prior warnings before those citations were issued. They were told what ordinances they were violating. They were told what they could do to remedy that, and they were given some time to do so. They just failed to comply. Additional 10 people were given warnings, and they complied to those warnings and took care of the situation before we had to issue any kind of citation. We've implemented a new written warning procedure back there. Officer Frydzinski basically hands the individual a piece of paper that has the ordinances that they're in violation of. It has things that they can do to remedy those, and it gives them a specific date that they need to have it done by. And if they respond, or she responds to a tent that we can't identify the owner of, she'll leave that written warning there. It's documented in a report, so that if we come back in a couple days and identify that person, or in 2 weeks when the time is up, we can issue that individual a ticket at that point. Crimes within the Pines, we have every kind of crime in the Pines that we do outside of the Pines and any other part of the community. Drugs are an issue. They continue to be an issue back there. One drug that's becoming prevalent is bath salts. It's a synthetic stimulant with effects similar to cocaine, methamphetamine, and ecstasy. We have meth and we have heroin, probably every other kind of drug you can think of, but meth, heroin, and the bath salts are the primary ones right now. Just a couple updates. Assaults in the Pines, we've had 8 since May 1st that we've done. 2 of them have made the news recently here within the last month. One individual was hit with a hammer in the face. She sustained some injuries. That investigation is ongoing. We have not identified the suspects at this time. We have collected some evidence, and we are processing that and continuing our investigation in hopes to identify that individual. The other one was just recently where a female was hit with a crutch in the face. That individual, again, sustained some injuries. We did identify the suspect in that. We interviewed her, and when we went to place her under arrest for that assault, she refused to come out of the tent. So we went and obtained a search warrant signed by the magistrate. We got a search warrant, executed that search warrant, entered the tent, and made the arrest. So just because they live in the Pines doesn't mean that we're going to violate any kind of their constitutional rights because the tent, they have an expectation of privacy. We went and got a search warrant for that. Just some of the other updates in the Pines. Trash pickup continues to be provided by the city staff and also GFL. Syringe pickup continues to be provided by ATS, and I think some other service providers, when they're out there, are also helping with that as well. And the porta potties are still there. There was threatened that they were going to be removed because of syringes and other things being placed in the reservoir. Officer Frydzinski went through the Pines and said, this is what's going to happen if it doesn't change. A lot of the individuals were upset that they were going to be removed, and I think took it upon themselves to help. Also, the city upped the daily or weekly cleanings, which I think helped. And since that time, we have not had any issues with it. So that's one good thing. I did walk through there the other day. It's not perfect, but it's probably the cleanest I've seen the Pines in a long time. And that's, you know, because of city staff, because of Officer Frydzinski, and the many volunteers that go back there, and also the residents that some of those do take pride in where they live, and they want to keep the area clean, and they help pick it up. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Jen Holm. She's going to talk about the QRT and some of the work that that's doing.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Commissioners. This mic is really tall and I am not. Okay. The Traverse City Police Department's Quick Response Team is a multidisciplinary of 53 partners collaborative that is designed to support people who are experiencing crises related to co-occurring disorders, substance use, mental health, and who are experiencing homelessness. We provide a network of agencies who all work together to address the community challenges, to advocate for change, and to provide wraparound services. Basically, the idea is we get to the root causes of law enforcement contacts and then interrupt the cycle of arrest and addiction. That's the goal. So with that, we have had 312 unique referrals to QRT. We have 244 individuals who are eligible for the services we provide. An additional 68 have been screened out of the program, but they have been provided resources to help meet their needs. I carry an active caseload of anywhere between 100 to 110, and we have had 170 people agree to become program participants, signing the paperwork to be a part of this voluntary program. The percentage of the QRT referrals who are experiencing homelessness is about 88%. So approximately 88% of all the people who get referred to the QRT are experiencing homelessness at the time of their referral. The percentage of the people in the Pines who are QRT is approximately half. We have 45 individuals have been referred to the QRT who regularly live in the Pines. 29 of those, 64%, have signed paperwork to become program participants. I'm excited and proud to say that since its implementation, we've had 122 individuals engage with treatment for substance use disorder or mental health, or who have received housing. Specifically, 42 people in 2024 have already accessed services. We have had 47 people enter housing after their referral to QRT. 94% remained housed. So that is very exciting. We have the coalition to thank for that, and also the diversion program. We have had 38 individuals referred to QRT who have had their needs met locally, and 20 individuals who have been safely relocated, meaning that they've been connected with family or other supports in another area. And so they are not part of our community anymore, but they have been safely relocated somewhere else. Some of the ways we support people in the Pines and the community is through what we call both and enforcement. The idea being trauma informed and supporting people who are living in the Pines while also maintaining expectations and accountability. So Chief was telling you already about the written warning system that we have developed. The other aspects of being trauma informed, using community partners to help address some of the things that are causing the ordinance violations, and to basically help people to get through some of those ordinance violations and like figure it out and be able to not get a ticket, right? Like be able to fix the situation and make it better so that they don't experience that. We are also providing verbal warnings. Officer Krista Frzinski does a lot of warnings back there and trauma-informed approach to enforcement, while also, maintaining the expectations and understanding that, tickets will be given and we will have the accountability and that expectations, because accountability is also love. We have supported the victims who are a part of the Pines. Both of the victims that Chief was telling you about have been contacted by the QRT, one of whom is a program participant. And so we do try to support all victims of overdose who occur in the city limits, and then also the victims of various assaults and things like that in the Pines. Our officers are our largest QRT referral source, both for just getting supports for people and also when they go through trauma, trying to take care of the root causes and address some of the things that impact their lives. We have taken some measures that have kind of been, I'm just going to summarize everybody else's presentations, but we have taken some of the measures in the Pines to try to just make it a little better. One of those things is trash pickup. We do regular check-ins with the Northwest Michigan Coalition to End Homelessness bi-weekly with Officer Frzinski and myself. And as we're checking in, we're talking about transitions for folks who are getting into housing, how we can best support, if there are people who are being problematic in the Pines, giving them warnings, seeing if there are opportunities to clean up trash, to help with the transition into housing, which can be a really emotional one. We have also been very blessed to have transitional beds awarded by the city that will support folks who are experiencing a transition with an exit plan. So if they are not eligible for detox, we have some detox beds that are reserved at Addiction Treatment Services. But if they're not eligible for detox, let's say they've been in jail or they're coming from a different place and they really just need like a week where we can figure it out, it's not really practical or available to be able to use hotel stays and things of that nature. And so we are blessed to have those transitional beds with ATS. I am also proud to say that a position has been offered to add an additional police social worker to our TCPD, which is very exciting. And we have also presented to the county commission for possible expansion into the county. That remains to be seen if that is going to occur, but we are advocating for it. And they have asked us to come back and provide more information, so we'll take it. We have also experienced some setbacks from the QRT. And those setbacks impact not only the Pines residents, but also the community. So some of those things, as part of the QRT, we discuss what we call potholes, gaps in service provision between agencies. There are things that we can advocate for, things that we can change internally, policies that we can address with the agencies, and then there are larger community-based issues. Some of those things involve justice-involved QRT. So what that would mean is like, there was a jail diversion program through Community Mental Health. Their grant funding ran out, so their program looks very different than it did. Similarly, the court and the community outreach court, which was a part of the city, is not currently functioning in the same capacity that it once was. And I believe with QRT being in the works, we know that folks are more successful if they are entering treatment, if they have housing at the end of it, just like Ashley was saying. And I think part of being justice involved and having the court's involvement with that in some capacity is a very useful solution for folks because sometimes avenues can be advocated for, such as housing, where it can actually get to some of the root causes of why people are experiencing law enforcement contact. Okay, housing choice vouchers. There's been an indefinite pause on housing choice vouchers, and so I believe that will affect the outflow. There may be a reduction in outflow slightly. We are grateful to the coalition who has many different options and tries to navigate through several other ways of doing that, but I think that may impact our community. The coalition is actively working to find new housing strategies through other types of vouchers. Long-term affordable housing options continue to be a barrier in our community. Another barrier is lack of shelter. A lack of a night-by-night emergency shelter available year-round is a problem. It reduces shelter options for those experiencing homelessness in our community. It impacts the number of residents living in the Pines, and if there are neighboring communities who are not allowing camping, then it impacts the number of folks that we're seeing in the city. The coalition's diversion program has been very impactful for our residents in the Pines and also for QRT referrals. Like I said, 20 QRT referrals have been safely relocated at this time. Support for a year-round emergency shelter, more long-term housing options, and continued prioritizing of local residents and permanent supportive housing would be beneficial to our TC community. And I'm grateful for everything the City Commission has done up until this point. So thank you very much so far. I mentioned our expansion into the county. I believe that would also be a support because we would likely see more folks referred to QRT with the other components of mental health and substance use, and probably fewer folks who are maybe actively experiencing homelessness, hopefully as more of a prevention strategy. So it would be great to be able to do that. We have given that presentation. If the commission is interested or if there's anything else, we do compile monthly metrics for the QRT with current updates and successes and information. Those are made available to the QRT through our website, through the City Police. Thank you so much to the commission. It's an honor to be here and to talk about the QRT and just to be a part of the services that are offered in our community. I am so honored to work in Traverse City. I will hand it back to these two. Thank you.
So, as Sakura said, we've had 6 meetings of the stakeholder group representing the nonprofit, government, and business communities. And if I had to sum up, I think where the consensus is beginning to come is an agreement simply that we need a year-round shelter with supportive services for our homeless community. I had the opportunity to go with the chief of police and the community police officer to the Pines last week, and we walked around for about an hour. I was so impressed with the community police officer who has on a first-name basis with many of the people living in the Pines, but also, as you can imagine, shocked at the conditions in which these people are living. And we came across one woman who was kneeling in her bare legs and feet in the mud and obviously experiencing some significant mental health issues. And the community police officer helped her go and get properly dressed and tried to address her needs. But that was just one small example in my experience about what the conditions are like there. So we're at the point where our stakeholders have a lot of information, ideas, and potential plans to put to work and are seeking some direction from this commission to move forward. The Community Cares Coalition has presented a vision for a year-round shelter in Garfield Township, and this is their story to tell, not mine. But I think it's fair to say that there are some fundamental questions that will have to be answered about funding, permitting, transportation, service provider coordination, and construction timelines. Safe Harbor also is ready to present a short-term 2-year pilot for a year-round night shelter until a longer-term solution like the Community Cares Coalition proposal has been developed further. But I would say that there is this agreement, I think, virtually among all the stakeholders, and that is, come next May 1, 2025, we do not want to see people leaving Safe Harbor or another facility and having to go live in the trees, in the mud, in the pines of our city. Our service providers like Goodwill, Jubilee House, and Central United Methodist Church are willing to continue to cooperate in providing basic needs and day services. But as Sakura and our other presenters mentioned, there are some significant capacity issues. Police, providers, and the neighborhoods will also discuss additional safety and communications measures. And as Ashley's presentation noted, really the ultimate solution to our homelessness crisis is providing accessible, affordable, and permanent housing solutions and supportive services. But as we all know, these things take time and they take significant resources. Ultimately, our community, including our governmental leaders, must address what is a public safety and health issue, and first and foremost, a humanitarian issue. We believe our community has the talent, the resources, and the will to ensure that next summer we will not have 100 people living in the trees and the mud of the pines, and have a shelter coordinated with supportive services and eventually permanent housing that restores the dignity and safety of our homeless community. Thank you.
If you have any questions, just feel free to email us, or if you want to ask me now, that's great too, but we're happy to move on.
Go ahead, Heather.
I have a question. First of all, thank you so much to the coalition and to Chief Richmond and Jen. Thank you so much and Officer Frazinski. That we have the cleanest pines that we've ever had it's huge, and thank you so much for making the effort this spring. So it was mentioned that a healthy vacancy rate is between 5% and 8%. In our community have 0.9%. We have 0% vacancy of deeply affordable units. Now, and we have 70 individuals who are chronically homeless. Now, it looks like I saw a slide that said those individuals were from the 5-county area. Are those vacancy rates just in the city, or is that also in the 5-county area?
County? That's Grand Traverse County. The
Okay.
data information I'll have to point to Ashley to, but I will repeat the answer here so that people can hear.
Okay, so 0 deeply affordable units in Grand Traverse County.
There's not 0 deeply affordable units. There's just, at the time that the study was done, there's 0 movement into and out of.
Vacancy.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
And that was just Grand Traverse County. And when I say like our numbers are 70 and stuff like this from the 5-county, there are, outside of Grand Traverse, there's probably a handful of folks
From
in the,
Benzie or Leland
yeah.
or so.
Yep.
Okay. But up to this point, we don't have any kind of help coming in from the county to deal with the situation.
financially, no.
Anything else?
Nate Elger has been a participant of our group that Sakura and Dave were talking about. I've made a presentation to the county, and then Jen has, and team for QRT, but financially, no.
Okay.
They have, now let me back that up, sorry. They did provide ARPA dollars for Annika too. So they did provide, I think, was that development? 400,000 for Annika too.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Mai.
So recognizing that the expansion of QRT to the county would be a big support overall, and that one of the asks of the coalition is for the city and county to work jointly on a plan to end homelessness, what steps do we have available to us in the city to affect that plan and bring that forward?
Is that a self-reflection question?
I think it's more direction on how we can, how there might be some helping to bridge a
Absolutely.
partnership.
I was making that comment in jest, but Ashley actually has some great case studies of how local governments can work together. I think these series of meetings have demonstrated how multi-stakeholders can get together. It's developing new relationships, new information to work from. So, if that's a starting point for those staff conversations to happen, then we're more than happy to keep facilitating that.
Thank you. Then a second question is with respect to Safe Harbor and the need for an emergency year-round overnight shelter. What does Safe Harbor need from the city to support that solution?
Sure. So I don't represent Safe Harbor, but in those meetings together, they have been taking a look at this because this need has, been made aware to them for, longer than the 6 months that we've been meeting. And so, they would like direction from the city of, how they should move forward. Should they be considering a year-round option? As we know, they would have to go through a special land use permit amendment process. So they, have expressed that they are at the ready to work with the city again. And, I think that would be kind of an ask from the city.
Yeah, and we heard a presentation from the chair of the board of Safe Harbor at our last meeting, and they presented a budget which looked primarily at programming and hiring permanent staff. Most of Safe Harbor, as I'm sure the commission knows, has been kind of a working board, depending on a lot of volunteers. So, as we talked to them about how they would prepare to serve as a year-round night shelter, funding, roughly $1 million a year for run rate, some capital improvements, but primarily for staffing for other programming would be necessary. And as Sakura mentioned, I think it's really important to underscore they would be looking to the city commission to ask them to present and develop a plan rather than initiating it on their own.
I'm just going to maybe not ask, maybe be more introspective or reflective, as Sakura said. So I guess I want to kind of summarize as we're having this overall conversation. I appreciate that Mr. Elger's been at the table for this. I think I've heard a lot of discussion about QRT expanding to the county and in a positive way, as in like people wanting to figure out how to move forward with that, and I'm very heartened to hear that. I think for a long time, this conversation has revolved around the city because the city has done it, and the ARPA funding even that we have gotten from the county was given here in the city, for a project here in the city, I should say. I would just like to underline as we have this conversation and we have some attention here, that this is also a cost measure. I know sometimes certain bodies like to look at things just in dollars and cents. Every single person who lives in a township, as well as the city, pays taxes to the county. The county administers our courts, our jail, and everything else and also we're all users of Munson Healthcare, and along the way, all of that gets put into our budgets. And I think it can be very easy when the action's only happening within a certain boundary to say, well, they're handling it, or that's not our problem, but it's everybody's problem when it comes to their taxes, it's everybody's problem when it comes to their bottom line. And I would really love to see in the future, as we move forward, more of the conversation that's already happening. That's amazing. But also seeing maybe some of the townships get involved, as they can be locations for some of these much-needed housing units. I've also heard that some outright try to block, some have looked at their statistics and think they put too much out there. And we are very well aware as a city that pilots are a loss of income to your tax base. And we understand that. And we're not asking any one unit to pick up every other piece, but to look at that as a way of the whole versus the cost in the jail system, in the court system, and the other systems that are actually paying for this. And we have the numbers, thank you to Ashley's slide, that this is cost effective too. So I guess from up here in this moment, I'm putting out the plea to the fellow leaders of our local governmental bodies to join us in this and have the conversation. And I really wanted to use that as a way to tie up to thank Dave and Sakura for being at the helm of this conversation, because both of you represent organizations that support a lot of organizations doing all of this work, but it's not your projects. And in that way, I think it's really important that we've had you all as kind of mediators, as well as a professional mediator, leading this conversation. And I think that's what's always been needed. It's been too often different local government bodies sitting back and saying, well, we want to do this, come sit with us and listen to how we want to do it. And I think you all have hit on the right note of how to bring us all together without it being anyone demanding and everyone just sitting together to find a solution. And as we talk about moving forward with the day shelters, or the potential year-round shelters, I know there's another party involved, and I think that that's where we can have the conversation as well, as if we do move forward with pilots, let's say, for Safe Harbor. I think if everybody came together and found a perfect other location and all the partners were on board, I think that nobody would have problems with if a pilot was shorter. But I also agree with the sentiment that has been stated here that we can't spend another year wondering if a construction project's actually going to get done on time, worrying that we thought it would be done and there's legal battles. The city is very well aware of how legal battles can pop up and add to your timeline. So I'm hoping that as we move forward on this, that we can kind of remind our neighbors that they have a stake in this too, even if it's just financial and they don't see another need, it's still there. And reminding all the partners in the community that are out there working towards this goal that there can be multiple paths to our solution that are going to involve everybody in this conversation. And I see a lot of people here representing different groups, and that heartens me as well. So I wanted to just pontificate for a moment, I guess, and thank everybody for being a part of this conversation and bring up some of those larger points for our community. Any other, sorry, I got long-winded, but please feel free if anybody else wants to.
Just on the subject of partnership with the county, I know that the opioid task force had made some recommendations and that those may be coming back to the board for consideration. I think that their commissioners needed a little more information, but the city has budgeted in our fiscal year 25 budget to be partners in those endeavors. So when and if those measures are passed by the county commission, we're ready for the additional social worker. And if you wouldn't mind, Lauren, talking a little bit about the work that you did with the courts.
Sure. And I'm really thankful to have had the opportunity to sit with the judges and the sheriff and the police chief and the prosecutor's office and others to talk about this approach that was taken previously. Community court is something a little bit like substance abuse court, if you want to think of it that way. And really it is an opportunity for folks that have come in contact with the legal system to have sort of wraparound services to identify what was the root of that and how can we kind of solve that root so that we can help folks out to not have that happen again. And so that's what we're trying to get back to. It was a grant-funded position that had been in the district court previously, and the grant funding ran out. So we're hopeful that we can partner together with the courts and with the county to bring that back. And there are some alternative methods that the courts can use, and even holding court in a less formal setting, like at Safe Harbor at one of the churches, that can really be beneficial to helping folks and meet them where they are. So that's what we're hopeful we can get back to. And the courts found that it was helpful to them and to reduce recidivism. And I think that law enforcement agencies thought that it was beneficial as well. And so I'm hopeful we can reinstate that.
And Mayor Shamro, just one more thing. I have been in conversations with our day shelter partners as well. A number of them have been identified, including Safe Harbor, for CDBG, or that Community Development Block Grant funding. But I know one of our day shelter funder needs more funding than that. So in light of that request, I will be sharpening my pencil and talking to the staff about how we could put together something to support them for one more year. And again, we know it's not perfect, but we want to. They've made the ask, Jubilee House, and we want to come back and see what we can do to support them in that ask. So I just thought I'd take this opportunity, because we've had several meetings and we're talking about this now. That's on the radar for a future meeting very soon.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or updates from the commission up here? All right. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. We very much appreciate the update. Okay. And because this is kind of oddly out of order, we're now getting to the consent calendar.
All right. The purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one commission motion without discussion. Any member of the commission, staff, or the public may ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed therefrom and placed elsewhere on the agenda for individual consideration by the commission, and such requests will be automatically respected. If an item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted in parentheses on the agenda is approved by a single commission action adopting the consent calendar. 1, consideration of approving the minutes of July 15th, 2024, July 22nd, 2024, and August 12th, 2024 meetings of the City Commission. Approval recommended. 2, consideration of accepting a public utility easement for the water main and sanitary sewer purposes at 1527 Cass Street. Approval recommended. Consideration of accepting a public walkway easement located along the Boardman River and the building located at 309 West Front Street, which easement is required as part of their land use permit. Acceptance recommended. 4, consideration of introducing an ordinance amendment which would rezone the property commonly known as 10200 East Carter Road from RC Residential Conservation District to R3 Multiple Family Dwelling District, as requested by the property owner and recommended by the City Planning Commission. Introduction and schedule for possible enactment on September 3rd, 2024 recommended. 5, consideration of introducing an amendment to the Traverse City Code of Ordinances, which would add offices, legal services, business services, and real estate and insurance services as allowed uses by right in the H1 Hospital District, in consideration of scheduling the ordinance amendment for possible enactment on September 3rd, 2024. 6, consideration of authorizing a reduction in minimum lot size for a planned unit development for the property known as 1032 Woodmere Avenue. Approval recommended. 7, consideration of introducing an amendment to the Traverse City Code of Ordinances to establish the Hickory Hills Advisory Committee. Introduction and schedule for possible enactment on Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024 recommended. 8, consideration of authorizing the return of $46,874.56 to Preserve Hickory as requested by representatives of Preserve Hickory. Approval recommended. 9, consideration of authorizing a settlement agreement in connection with the pending PFAS class action litigation. 10, consideration of authorizing an amendment to the agreement with the State of Michigan for it to provide full reimbursement in connection with the COVID in the wastewater analysis project, and consideration of authorizing an amendment to the related consultant agreement to provide all sample collection, lab analysis, lab supplies, and reporting services to meet the grant requirements for the period of October 1, 2024 through September 30th, 2025. Approval recommended. 11, consideration of authorizing a budget amendment to increase the Old Town TIF's contribution to the Hannah Park Overlook by $25,000 for a total contribution of $5,000, and consideration of authorizing a contract for the work. Consideration of authorizing, 12, consideration of authorizing an amendment to the service agreement with Downtown Development Authority to provide that it will cover $240,534 of the $352,000 cost for garbage collection services within the DDA district, and consideration of authorizing an amendment to the agreement for garbage collection services to extend the agreement by 3 years. 13, consideration of authorizing a 5-year lease agreement for the retail space located at 303 East State Street within the Larry C. Hardy parking structure. Approval recommended. 14, consideration of authorizing an agreement for mutual aid at the Cherry Capital Airport. Approval recommended. 15, consideration of authorizing an amended purchase order for 2 new ambulances to include 2 upgraded power cots for primary transport purposes for use by the fire department, and superseding the related motion approved May 6, 2024. Approval recommended. 16, consideration of authorizing a 3-year purchase order for spring and fall washdown of the Larry C. Hardy parking structure and Old Town parking structure. Approval recommended. 17, consideration of authorizing a purchase order for a greater blade attachment for use by the Streets Division. Approval recommended. 18, consideration of certifying the Traverse City Light and Power property of 4728 Cedar Run Road as surplus. Approval recommended. 19, consideration of appointing City Treasurer, Finance Director as employer delegate for the Municipal Employees Retirement System Annual Conference. Approval recommended. I'm done.
All right. And after all that, would anybody like any items pulled from the consent calendar? Go ahead, Heather.
4 and 11, please.
Okay, any else? Yep, go ahead,
Thank
Jackie.
you.
I have brief questions about 2, 3, 6, 7, 12, and 13.
Okay, they're all individual, or you want to
Yes.
pull each one? Okay.
I would like to pull each one. Thank
2,
you.
what were they, sorry again? 2, 3,
2, 3, 6, 7, 12, and 13.
okay. Anybody have, from the public, want to pull anything other than 4, 11, 2, 3, 6, 7? Oh, did you point at somebody? Wait, just one moment. 6, 7, 12, or 13 from the consent calendar. Does anybody from the public want to pull something? Please feel free to approach the podium. Okay, it's already pulled, so that's fine. Bringing it back. Did anybody else want any, that's not one of those numbers, sorry. I don't know if that got lost in that translation there. Okay, bring it back. I would take a motion. Sorry, I realized could I have a motion then for the,
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar as amended.
thank you.
Support.
Thank you. Any comment on that item? Seeing none, bring it back. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, we'll start with item number 4, the consideration of rezoning 10200 East Carter Road. And Heather, what was your question about this one?
So I watched the Planning Commission meeting from last week, and I just want to make it clear to everyone that this is not the actual request to approve the pilot. This is just a rezoning. This is rezoning to R3 from whatever it is now. I'm not sure. Maybe a couple of different things. So there were a number of issues that came up from the public, like the blind corner, the traffic, these traffic issues along 72. Would there be a noise buffer? I'd just like to make sure that those were actually dealt with, that Leelanau County has to make maybe Director Winter, you could answer these questions?
Do you have a question?
I thought I was having a question.
I didn't catch it. I'd be happy to answer it if I can. but I didn't hear a question.
The traffic issues like the blind corner and just Morgan Farms, all these different housing arrangements trying to access the same place. I understood from the meeting that you'd have to talk to Leelanau County to get those.
Yeah, so the city
issues
doesn't have
addressed.
jurisdiction over Carter Road. That's a Leelanau County Road Commission street, so they would be the ones issuing driveway permits and things like that.
Will there be a traffic assessment done prior to the pilot approval?
No, not that I'm aware of. And this is separate from the pilot. This is just a
yes.
rezoning, so, yeah.
Well, just kind of skipping ahead, but no, there wouldn't be any
There's
Traffic
not one
assessment.
required for that, no.
Because, why not?
We don't have a requirement that they have to perform a traffic study.
Because there aren't enough housing units going in?
We don't have a standard that makes a threshold that says once X number of housing units go in, you have to do a traffic study or anything like that. In the past, it's been a condition of certain approvals, such as Morgan Farms. So when they did phase 2, I believe, no, phase 3, which is under construction right now, that was a condition of their PUD is before starting phase 3, they had to do a traffic study. So that came from the city commission and/or planning commission.
Okay, so if this were a PUD instead of a pilot, then perhaps you would need a traffic assessment because it's just a,
That would be a decision of the planning commission, the city commission, because it's not an established standard that
Okay.
says you have to do one. So, and again, it's regardless of the pilot, so just the rezoning.
okay. I guess I'll save the noise buffer for when we get down to the actual pilot agreement. So I guess that's all I have to say. The planning commission did approve it unanimously, so.
Okay, are there any other questions? Or I would take a motion. Go ahead, Mai.
Well, I have a follow-up question to Commissioner Shaw's question, which is that if East Carter Road is not under the city's jurisdiction, would the city be able to require a traffic study on East Carter Road?
That is a good question. That may be one for the city attorney, but typically for something of this size, I've never heard of a traffic study being asked of for something so small.
So the configuration, this is on the agenda tonight. There's no mechanism for requiring a traffic study. The reason that Morgan Farms had a traffic study is because a PUD within that process and as enabled in the Zoning Enabling Act, the city commission, when approving a PUD, can give conditions, and that's allowed under the Zoning Enabling Act. So under a rezoning, which is what is on for tonight's agenda, there's no ability under the Zoning Enabling Act to have conditions like a traffic study, and neither for a pilot, because that's a separate consideration of funding. That's not a land use consideration. So for what's on the agenda tonight, there wouldn't be an avenue to require a traffic study.
For either the rezoning or the pilot
Right.
request?
Yes. Yeah, it was a different zoning mechanism that created Morgan Farms. So under a PUD, a planned unit development, that is baked in to the statute and the ordinance that they can be approved, disapproved, or approved with conditions. So a condition was to have a traffic study for example, for Morgan Farms, the traffic study occurred on M72.
Just at the entrance, yeah.
Right, at the entrance, and then they added recently the turn lane or something. up
Yeah,
the
so
hill.
they had to submit their work. It's
Right.
getting reviewed by MDOT right now.
Right.
Yep. for
It's getting
permitting.
reviewed by MDOT right now, you said? Is
Yep.
that what you just said?
Probably a month ago, I reached out to their permit reviewer, because again, it's between MDOT and the developer right
And
now.
the Morgan Farms
So the
developer.
Morgan Farms developer hired a firm to do a traffic impact study that called for X, Y, and Z. MDOT agreed with those findings, so now they've hired a engineering firm to design those improvements that the traffic impact study called for. And so MDOT, since it's their trunk line, is reviewing those plans to make sure all their standards are met. So it'll basically add a left turn lane. So when you're heading, I guess that would be eastbound on M72 coming down the hill, you would have a left turn lane for turning into Morgan Farms, and there will be a deceleration lane on the right-hand side for westbound traffic to get out of the travel lane and slow down and then turn in.
Would this help at all the Carter Road development?
Potentially, it depends. So in Morgan Farms, again, that was a mixed-use piece of vacant land that was proposed with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of homes and commercial amenities and things like that. So that's why that was a condition.
Did you have another?
I would like to add that this is very near to my neck of the woods, and so I was curious what the configuration was like, and so went and explored both the property having the request for the rezoning and pilot, and then also went back through Morgan Farms and what is existing in on this 10200 East Carter Road, plus what is being proposed to be built there, is such a fractionally smaller number of buildings and residences than what is in Morgan Farms. To your point,
Yeah.
the impact is quite negligible.
I would agree.
And question, I'm trying to remember from the discussions earlier, this also has other units, affordable housing units nearby, correct? This is an
This is an
extension?
existing development, so
Yeah.
it was approved in 1991, probably 11 years before Morgan Farms even got approved. It was approved at that time as a SLUP. It was zoned for multifamily then. For some reason, and we can't find paperwork to determine why, in 1999, the city adopted a whole new zoning map and zoning ordinance, which this particular parcel, through that process, changed to RC, residential conservation, which essentially made it illegal. What was there already, it had already been previously approved. So now, fast forward 33 years, the Housing Commission's in a position to go for additional funding and add new units there. Those are primarily all 3 and 4 bedroom units, one of a handful of type affordable developments throughout the region for families. So that's been a huge asset to our community. However, their market has indicated a much stronger need now for 1 and 2 bedroom units, so they would like to add some 1 and 2 bedroom units to that mix.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was trying to remember. I actually remembered it.
Yeah.
All right, do we have any more questions, or would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that an amendment to the Traverse City Code of Ordinances, Appendix, I think that's an I?
Please wait until after the motion's made, and then we do public comment.
I make the recommendation that an amendment to the Traverse City Code of Ordinances, Appendix I, zoning map changes, which would rezone property commonly known as 10200 East Carter Road from RC Residential Conservation District to R3 Multiple Family Dwelling District, as requested by the owners on record of 10200 East Carter Road, and as recommended by the Planning Commission, be introduced and scheduled for possible enactment on September 3rd, 2024.
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Pro Tem Wilson. And just to remind everyone, this is a introduction for possible enactment on September 3rd. This is not a final vote on anything. Are there any other questions or from the commission before we open for public comment? Seeing none, at this time we'll open up for public comment. Please go to the podium. You haven't done the
No.
intro yet.
I'm going to read the public comment rules. We ask that you state your name and address to indicate if you are a city resident, non-city resident, and/or city business owner. We have a 3-minute time allotment per speaker. When your time has elapsed, the timer will beep. And finally, we request that all language be respectful to all parties.
Thank you.
Hi, Elisa Korn, Deputy Director, Traverse City Housing Commission, representing the current ownership and future ownership of this property. Just wanted to let you know I was here. I wasn't prepared for a public comment on this particular topic because it's just an introduction to allow a public hearing. But I did want you to know that I was here for future time on the pilot request later on the agenda, which I think would be a more appropriate time probably to talk about the details of this. We had a preliminary site plan that was presented to the Planning Commission, and I just wanted to remind you guys that it's a preliminary site plan that's required for us to get an idea of what we're going to need to put together for the tax credit application. And so this rezone is really important at the beginning of the process, but it by no means represents what the final product may eventually look like. So I just wanted to remind, we're just here for that public hearing request for the rezoning to allow us to start the first step of our tax credit application for October 1st. And that's it. I'm just here if you need me.
Thank you.
In the corner. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jenny Young. I live in 1015 Camrose Circle, which is part of Morgan Farms. We abut to the property that's being discussed today. We believe a jump from RC to R3 zoning is too extreme and does not fit the current or draft new master plan. If the committee would consider a full build-out of this property under R3, which we requested of the Planning Commission on August 7th. However, this information is not included in the packet. Although the Planning Committee is arguing the proposed site plan is low density and therefore meets the master plans, what is under discussion is not any particular site plan, as we just heard, but a significant zoning change for the entire property. There are no guarantees the Housing Commission will not build more apartments in the future, or if they're unable to get their funding, will not sell this property as they considered less than 5 years ago due to health and safety concerns. This could open up the property for a developer to come in and fill up this 10-acre property with apartments or other high-density housing, which clearly would not fit TC2 under the current master plan or contemporary housing neighborhood in the draft of the new master plan, as these are described as larger lots, lower density residential developments with predominantly single-family homes, whereas an R3 zoning is considered high density with multifamily housing. Although Eagle declared the current occupied area safe for residential use in 2021, there are still 4 areas on this property that exceed the site-specific direct contact criterion, in spite of this revised criterion being 3 times as high as the generic residential direct contact criterion. Although the Planning Commission cannot find the documentation of the exact reason why this property was zoned RC in '99, communications with Mr. Winter indicate it may have been due to the arsenic contamination, along with steep grades and potential drainage concerns. We believe an R1 or R2 or even a PUD would be more appropriate, or perhaps an alternative to consider, given the current proposal is already essentially spot zoning, would be to keep the area that is still contaminated as RC and only rezone the area deemed buildable by the Housing Commission as R3. In summary, we would urge the City Commission to consider the potential long-term impact of a zoning change to R3 and ensure this aligns with the master plan, as well as addresses other city priorities through slope and tree protection. Thank you for considering our concerns.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item?
Hello, Janet Fleshman. First of all, I'm in favor of housing on this site, more housing on this site, and I support subsidized housing in the city because given the cost of land, it's probably the only way that we can get affordable housing anywhere near the city core. That said, this is an enormous zoning switch from a residential conservation, which calls for flowing roads, cul-de-sacs, honoring the topography, and so on, and going all the way up to an R3. I would ask you to consider it's possible that another approach, such as a PUD, might accomplish providing significant housing while still being congruent with both the new and draft master plans, as R3 is not. And I understand this is a hearing just to move it forward for a possible hearing. If you choose to do that, I think that you should have in your packet, and everyone, including all of us, your constituents, should be able to see exactly what a full build-out could look like, including a visual representation of building heights allowed, the maximum impervious surface of the new proposal versus what it is now, and the number of estimated car trips per day. I should think there would already have been, or I would like there to be before you come to a formal hearing, communication with Leelanau County about how to make sure future residents, who will be residents of the city of Traverse City, can safely access their homes on Quarter Road. This is a really sharp double-blind curve. In fact, I think you should have that available publicly and in your packet for all zoning changes, so we can all see exactly what all the future ramifications are. It should be complete with drawings of the full heights and dimensions, number of units, number of car trips. And again, I don't object to more housing on the site, but I look forward to seeing more complete information. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments?
Just considering that there's some time before, moving this forward, is there any opportunity for adjustment between now and then if we choose to before the next
This is for the zoning change. So what would happen is it would be introduced. When it comes back on the 3rd, the commission could vote it down, or they could vote to accept it. So that's what, and then there's other items to be considered, like the pilot, et cetera, down below. But for this particular item, that's what we're voting on right now, is are we going to bring it back for possible enactment on the 3rd, and where it would be held to a vote for the whole commission, or are we saying no to bringing it for possible enactment on the 3rd? That is what this
voted
was.
down at that time. Is there time to make adjustments?
I believe
killing the
if our housing commission representative would like to come, I believe that they have an October deadline, so I'm not sure how that will work.
Yeah, unfortunately, tax credit applications in Michigan are twice a year, October 1st and April 1st. So in order to meet our deadlines and get through the process, we would need to have some sort of answer on the zoning by the September 3rd meeting, just to allow us that time to finish the end of our application. Of course, the pilot is a part of that as well. So timing-wise, we are unfortunately bound by the October 1st deadline. If we were to successfully complete our application by that time, it usually takes until the beginning of the year for us to know if we are awarded. And at that point, we're looking at potentially a financial closing and construction start in late spring of 2026. So you can see that timeline really goes out depending on all the steps you have to go through. After tax credits are awarded and our financing's in place, that's where we have to jump through all of the hoops of environmental and traffic and noise and all those things. This is just that initial step to see if we even have access to those credits, which unfortunately are highly competitive and don't seldom come up north here. So we are hopeful that we can get through this and make it to the October 1st round, just to bring more housing as soon as we can to this area.
And since the question was raised, because I know I haven't heard anything, have you heard anything of potential of selling this property off at any time?
Absolutely not. We just received the title for this property from the city of Traverse City about 3 years ago. So somebody had mentioned a potential sale 5 years ago, but we didn't own the property at that time. The city of Traverse City did. So we have had the deed for that time, and absolutely not. We are fortunate to own property in the city of Traverse City that we have the ability to fulfill our mission to bring affordable housing. It would be pretty difficult to acquire any more property in this area, because believe me, we have certainly searched for more locations. As you know, we thankfully received a pilot from this board for our Parkview property, the former Tebow's Florist, which if you drive by, it's under construction now, and that was a hard thing to acquire. So no, we would certainly not sell off property that we have. It is true that part of that property has a contamination issue, but even more importantly, has a slope issue that would make it cost prohibitive for somebody in the subsidized housing business, if you will, to be able to afford to build on that. So we're only looking at that flat piece of property, which is not part of the contaminated section that was discussed before. And that is where we're looking at building, and by no means would we sell that off. It's like a gold mine to have the privilege of having that land to be able to hopefully get tax credits for and build on. So,
thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Heather.
No. Just one more. Was a planned unit development ever considered, and if so, why was it rejected?
So in 1991, I was graduating from high school here in Traverse City, so I missed that discussion. For whatever reason, this original property was done the way that it is done. And when we came forward to the city planning and zoning department to look at building out on this property, this was the suggested route, and it makes sense. When the property was originally done in 1991 and then eventually built, it was zoned differently. It was zoned to what we are asking for it to be returned to. Subsequently, 8 years later, the property was rezoned by the city and now makes our current property out of compliance. So we're just asking for a return to it. Believe me, if the Housing Commission had had the access to funds in 1991, we would have built out that property the way that we are hoping to complete it now. With the addition of 1 and 2 bedroom properties. To the best of my knowledge, there are only 2 other properties in the entire county that offer 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom subsidized units on the same property, and that would be Oak Park and Garfield Township and Tradewinds Terrace in the city of Traverse City. I'm pretty familiar with all of the inventory of housing in this county, and I can't think of anything else that would be this inclusive of property options, everything from senior and disabled adults all the way up to families of 8 people, which we have many of them already housed there. And it's really hard for families with more than 6 people to get housed because you aren't allowed to exceed 2 heartbeats per bedroom. So to have a 4-bedroom property available already is great. But unfortunately, the need that we have right now, which you guys heard about, is 1 and 2 bedrooms, really working with the coalition and in places like that to get people housed.
And a quick question, PUDs, you know, I've only got 8.5 years here, but to Lauren and yourself, we don't often do PUDs for affordable housing developments, isn't that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Because it's not usually the more complicated issues that
Yeah,
arrive from those.
I don't recall ever doing one, and I could be mistaken, but I don't recall doing one since I've
I
been
have,
here.
yeah, the one, when I think of a PUD, I think of more of a mixed use, like a
Mhm.
retail and housing, and that is not part of the affordable housing model and the subsidized world that we live in.
Thank you.
A follow-up question to that is, given the competitive nature of these housing tax credits, would going in as a PUD potentially be a stumbling block to being competitive?
It's the timeline that would be the stumbling block, yeah.
Yeah, that's a much.
So we would very much love to be a part of the October 1st round. We have a really great application that we're putting together. We are looking at providing on-site services through our community room for the community as well as residents for financial literacy, homeownership, substance abuse, mental health, and I put in a call to the Boy Scouts today to see if they want to host Boy Scout meetings there. So we're kind of looking at a holistic sort of community center that would be located there, and that community room would be available for these kind of not-for-profit classes to hold and be not only for residents, but for everybody.
Thank you. Any other questions at this time? Okay. Thank you. All right, I'll bring it for a vote then. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, so on to, sorry, I lost my form here. Item number 11. All right, and you had this one
Yeah,
pulled as well?
that's me again. This is the Hannah Park overlook. So, my big question is what's there right now is sitting sort of broken with the missing stairs at the top. Is it going to get any bigger than what it is right now? It's impossible to tell from
We have a
those
head shake from
plans.
Michelle
Okay.
Hunt from Parks, and we'll have her and Ann approach.
Hi, Michelle, thank you.
Hi, Heather. Yes, Michelle Hunt, Parks and Recreation Superintendent. It will not get bigger. We are making sure that there'll be seating, and then there's going to be a railing over the brick part now that you look over. So bigger footprint, no, but it will invite people to actually sit and enjoy it.
Okay, that was my primary concern. So it's not going to affect the big spruce tree that's sitting
No.
there, and you can go ahead and pull the grapevines out, please.
Yes.
And yeah, that was my only other concern is always having to do with these geotextile. I couldn't find any particular danger with this stuff, except that it tends to disintegrate in the light. But anytime we have plastic that's interfacing with our natural resources of any, why do you need geo blocks in there and not just gravel?
The engineer that designed it is not here, so I'm not exactly sure what the theory was behind all of that, but those are well accepted in our community. I've used them anyway in other states. I don't know if we've ever used them here. Alex might know. They are lightweight, yes.
Yeah, I would just really like, the engineering department to always be aware that you don't know what's going to happen to that plastic. We've used plastic all over the place. We've used it on our beaches. We've used it to hold down turf, and it's going to be safe. It's going to be safe. It's going to keep everything together, but then it isn't. It flakes off, it splinters into pieces, and it ends up in our water supply. So if there's any way, always, you can be thinking about how to not use plastic where it interfaces with our natural resources, I would be so happy.
Alex, did you come up to address that, or did?
Yeah, I can help. So the foam is being used as fill to reduce the lateral earth pressure on the wall. It won't be exposed to light, as you mentioned, so it's not expected to degrade.
Okay. Thank you guys for those answers. Go ahead, Jackie, you have a question?
Yes. I was wondering about the funding on this project. I noticed that we're planning to tap the city capital improvement budget and the Brown Bridge Trust Fund, and I just wondered why we were going for that when we've got a $900,000 fund balance in the Old Town TIF, which would be, of course, more than enough to pay for the full cost of $185,000.
Was this one of the projects that was itemized in the last Brown Bridge vote?
No.
Was not? Okay. That is $900,000. That's Old Town TIF, I believe part of it is 30 years. It has not a lot of contributions to it because it was reset. Most of that money comes from the Haggerty building being sold, and that was a one-time item. So I believe we've been trying to work that in, so it's not just a TIF funding for other improvements that'll be needed in the region over the next couple decades, but that's a fair question that I don't know if we have an answer to. Michelle or, okay. Oh, Harry's back there. Sorry, Harry, I didn't see you.
Harry Burkhold is here from the DDA.
I don't know if I have the answer. I just know that this has been a project that was approved in our budget as kind of a split with the city. So the city had already paid for some design engineering work, and so this was really just a partnership project between the DDA and the city.
Any more detail?
Well, so with the Brown Bridge Parks Improvement Fund, typically, I know in the past since I've been here, if there are maintenance projects that were not in the original ballot proposal, they are good choices for the Brown Bridge Parks Improvement Fund to use for those maintenance projects and those capital investments. And when we got the original budget back, we said that there was more money needed for the project. It was a good time to come to the table as the DDA and the city to say, how can we continue supporting this project together? So that's why it's an additional 25 from city funds and an additional 25 from the DDA funds. And there's still, I don't have it off the top of my head, a surplus remaining in the Brown Bridge Parks Improvement Fund after this allocation. Significant surplus.
Thank you.
And I just realized, would anybody like to make a motion on this?
If I can find it. That the city commission, I move that the city commission authorize a budget amendment for the fiscal year 2024, 2025 to increase the Old Town TIF budget's contribution to the Hannah Park Overlook project to a total of $105,000, and further that the mayor and city clerk execute a contract with Walton Contracting in the amount of $167,864, with the city engineering being authorized to manage a 10% project contingency for a total of $184,650 for the Hannah Park Overlook project, with funds to come from the sources as outlined in the August 12th, 2024 communication from the city engineer, with such contract subject to approval as to its substance by the city manager and its form by the city attorney.
Thank you, Commissioner Shaw and Mayor Pro Tem Wilson. Do we have any other questions or comments on this item?
Only that it's incredibly expensive. You can still buy a house for that amount of money. And this is like 8 by 8 feet.
It's a reinforcement there, right? All right, any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Shaw?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stanley?
Yes.
Mayor?
Real quick question. Any commissioner who isn't here can bring an item back if it fails? I'll vote no, but I'm just letting the public know I support this. I'm voting no so in case we need to bring it, so we can bring it back before 6 months is up. Thank you very much. Motion fails then. We'll go to item number 2. Commissioner Anderson, you pulled this one?
Yes, I did. Thank you. Quick question. I just wondered, I'm aware that there's a subcommittee of the Planning Commission that is reviewing a riparian buffer policy, and I wondered for this proposal whether the easement is aligned with the riparian buffer policy that is under development/consideration.
Right now, there is no draft to say, yes, this is aligned with it or not. They're very introductory. They've had, I think, 2 or 3 meetings. City attorney is going to be there this week presenting the legal framework. So we're not at that point yet to have recommendations.
When would you expect there to be recommendations?
Maybe by the end of the year, maybe further, but I mean, there has been discussion recognizing the public access along the water and things like that, so.
All right, and is there timing sensitivity in this proposal?
I'm sorry, Lauren has a question first,
Well, I
or
just wanted
comment.
to, sorry, Sean, I didn't mean
No,
to
go ahead.
talk over you.
Nope.
For this and the next, the easement that's under number 3 as well, these are things that have been installed already. And so the city needs to accept the easements so that we can have control of the public infrastructure that is
Thank
within
you.
those easements. Does that help?
That makes it much clearer.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right.
All right, that's all I had on number 2.
All right, then, do we have any other questions, or could I get a motion?
I move that the utility easement from West Boardman Shores, as included with the official meeting materials for the August 19th, 2024 meeting of the City Commission, be accepted.
Or, thank you, Commissioner Shaw and Commissioner Anderson. Any other comments on these items? Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back for vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 3, Commissioner Anderson?
Yes, I had 2 questions about this. One is whether the cost of the project is coming from TIF 97 funds, and also whether construction of the stairway access or improvement of the current gravel pathway involves any cutting of trees or other existing greenery.
So at this time, despite not having the work of the riparian buffer committee completed, we do have waterfront setbacks and prohibitions that prohibit cutting of trees within there, except invasives, and then you have to replace each invasive with 2 non-invasive and leave the stump in place. So to answer that, they would not be able to cut the trees down in the water setback.
Thank you.
Yep.
From a funding perspective, yes, the staircase is funded by TIF 97.
And pathway also, I presume this is considered a consolidated project?
Well, the pathway is already in place. If we were to make improvements to the pathway, it would be under TIF 97, but right now this project is just focused on the staircase.
Thank you. I thought there were some improvements being made to a gravel pathway. Perhaps I misread. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Or take a motion? Go ahead.
I move that the public walkway easement from GLA Northern Michigan Pine LLC, as included with the official meeting materials for the August 19th, 2024 meeting of the City Commission, be accepted.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioners Anderson and Shaw. Any other items on this, or any other comments on this? Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. On to item number 6, Commissioner Anderson.
Yes, I had, again, 2 questions. One is wondering, given that we have a 3-acre minimum currently for planned unit development within Traverse City, is 3 acres the smallest of our existing PUDs, or are there already some that have been given variances like is being requested here?
I can't say offhand specifically. We don't use PUDs very often here. Up until a couple of years ago, it was 5-acre minimum, but they moved it down to 3 acres, I think, when they were considering the senior center as part of that effort, because the senior center didn't have 5 acres, but they needed some lenience to develop the property in a reasonable manner, so they changed it down to 3 acres. Some of the more notable PUDs we have include Fairway Hills, if you're familiar with that, between Union and Cass Street, Morgan Farms, Bayshore Resort. So most of them are on the larger scale.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is whether the area represented by Sheffer Street is included in the calculation of this 1.16 acre size.
So there is a portion of their property that the street crosses on the southwest corner. So yes, so that street does include part of their property. It kind of makes a narrow triangle, if you'll see in your packet, in that corner, and the road crosses over it. That street is not a platted street like most city streets are. It's an easement street. So yes, it has a right-of-way that overlaps onto the city's property and their property.
Would it be fair to characterize the existing Sheffer Street, that without decertification, that this planned unit development might not be able to be pursued?
No, I would say that's not the case, no.
Okay, so it could go forward even without decertification of Sheffer?
Yeah, because they're focusing on their property, and with the exception of where it crosses that corner, the street is pretty much wholly on the city property.
Okay, and then, of course, these are all market rate dwellings that are proposed for this, yes?
I think so at this time. That'll be for the developer to figure out in the future. Usually, if things aren't market rate, they're asking for a pilot or something. There's really no way to make that work otherwise, so, and that hasn't come up yet.
Thank you.
Yep, may come up in the future, though.
All right, do we have more questions or a motion?
I'll make the motion that the City Commission varies the minimum acreage requirement for a planned use development for the property located at 1032 Woodmere Avenue pursuant to Section 1362.013 as recommended by the Planning Commission and based upon the conditions, factors, and circumstances described in the August 8th memorandum from Planning Director.
Second. Okay, I'll give Shaw that. Thank you, Commissioner Stanley and Commissioner Shaw. Any further discussion on this? Any public comment on this item? Please feel free to approach. I was wondering if you'd come up, Tim.
Good evening, Tim Pulliam, 516 West 11th. I'm the person making this request. We don't have specific housing plans yet. We actually have a retail customer that we're working with. It's a local business that we're talking with about developing the retail portion. That's really why we need the PUD. But I can answer any other questions if you have them. Really, this just gives us an opportunity to put together the plan of kind of what we want to be able to do there and then come back and present it. And I think kind of PUDs, we're running out of 3-acre or 5-acre parcels in the city. So I don't think we'll see many PUDs if we don't start maybe reducing the size a little bit. So, and it's a great way to be able to do something, I don't know, cooler than normal. And that's kind of what we're known for, so.
Perhaps you could expand a little bit on the portion of this that involves possible decertifying of Sheffer Street. I have expressed concerns about whether or not that is a secondary backup access for the assisted living facility that's just down the road from your property.
Because we don't usually engage in discussion during public comment, I'm going to ask Sarah to just suspend the timer, please.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so this stretch of Sheffer Street is kind of all on its own. It's islanded, and you know we're going to be doing underground parking structure, which is part of the reason why we want the PUD, because we want to maintain as much green space as possible. And so having the underground parking works well. At that point, we don't really need Sheffer Street. We're the only ones who use it, and we basically use it for semi-deliveries for our wood shop. We'd love to decertify it and just create a park there, and I'm working with TARD already to create an access to the Boardman Lake Loop. Since, as Sean mentioned, part of our property actually goes all the way across Sheffer Street right now. So I'm working with Chris Cushman at TART to make an access there. We really kind of see that parkland and also this retail anchor as kind of being access for that entire neighborhood there to be able to reach the TART trail, and then also more like a park-like setting there where the retail and mixed use is going. It just feels like it'd be nicer than just the dirt road. We get more Boardman Lake Loop people passing through and cutting down the hill. So I don't know, it just seems like it'd be pretty neat to have that there. It's definitely not a requirement in the development. And really the PUD isn't even a requirement in the development from a housing standpoint. If we just wanted to like come in and blast up buildings of condos, we could do that by right on that property. We have a friend who's a local business owner. He's looking to expand and move his business. It's a cool opportunity for us. We like him. He's into things we're into, community and outdoors and things like that. And so the PUD really helps us to achieve that goal, and then maybe leave behind something that's kind of cool for the neighborhood and the city, and maybe start an anchor for, you know, what development can be along that corridor. we're not developers. We have done a couple developments in town, like right downtown, the only LEED Gold building. We just finished our new fully electrified facility in Arrow Park. It's the only fully electric facility in the industrial park there. And I'm pretty sure once we get through this process, providing that we do, we'll be able to go out and start working with our architects and engineers and put together something cool. And then we'll have a chance to come back and be told yes or no. But it'd be pretty cool to be able to bring something back that is better than just like a bunch of 6,000 square foot cubes by right on the site. And this PUD gives us a chance to tell that story.
Appreciate the extra detail. Thank you. I'll try to reach out to Chief Teller to allay my concerns about public safety.
Excellent. Yes, thank you.
Did you want to finish up with some public comment? I think kind of.
No, I was just popping up.
We
to see
kind
if
of,
you
it
need
got
anything.
muddled there, so thank you. I'm going to reopen it for public comment, but we'll pull you up if we have any other questions. Is there any other public comment on this item? And then I just have a quick question for Lauren then. Chief Tuller, like, things don't get approved if they don't meet our safety requirements for fire and
So
police,
when,
correct?
If and when this moves forward and there's an application for a PUD, that will go through a whole staff review process that includes all of public safety. And it'll come back with like a monster report and memo to the city commission that addresses all of the requirements for approval for a PUD, and that's in the mix.
Good to hear.
Okay, any other questions at this time? All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Stanley, second by Commissioner Shaw. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
All right, roll call. Oh, no, not roll call. Roll call, yeah, because it's a dissent, sorry.
Commissioner Anderson?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stanley?
Yes.
Commissioner Shaw?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes, motion passes. Okay, going to item number 12, Commissioner Anderson.
I believe I also asked for number 7.
Oh, sorry, I
Quick
thought that
question.
was, I miss, in my brain, I had that as 7, I apologize, Commissioner. So,
and-
item number 7.
A single question on this as to what kind of feedback have we received from GOREC and Preserve Hickory about this proposal?
They were the stakeholders that asked for the committee. So we had a stakeholder meeting. It was a really large group. I thought it went well, given a number of strong opinions about the uses on the Hill. And one of the first things that rose to the top as we left the committee was to reinstate the Hickory Hills Advisory Committee. And so I'm recommending that it mirror how we've done it by ordinance for the Brown Bridge Advisory Committee. It is a size of 12, which, given the large number of stakeholders that use that hill, I think it'll be broad enough to bring all those voices to the table. But I have not heard any other feedback.
You sound very confident that GOREC and Preserve Hickory would be very supportive of this.
I don't know that,
GOREC.
I talked with GOREC.
GOREC isn't involved in this, are they?
Do you mean the Rec Authority?
Yeah, the Rec
Yeah,
Authority.
yeah.
I'm
Well,
sorry.
they were at the meeting.
The Rec Authority was there as well, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yep.
All right.
Okay. Do we have any other questions or a motion?
I will make the motion that an amendment to the Traverse City Code of Ordinances to Chapter 1067 Hickory Hills Advisory Committee, which establishes the Hickory Hills Advisory Committee, yes, be introduced and scheduled for possible enactment on September 3rd, 2024.
Support.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item? Comments? Any public comment on this item? Please approach the podium if you want to make public comment.
Good evening. My name is Gerald DeGrazia, 11604 Whittington Street, Traverse City. I am a member of the Parks and Recreation Commission. I respectfully request the City Commission postpone any action on the City Manager's proposal and the new ordinance to create the Hickory Hills Advisory Committee until the Parks and Recreation Commission, the City Manager, the Parks and Recreation Superintendent, a representative from Preserve Hickory, and a representative of the City Commission meet to discuss the implications of the proposal and the ordinance. My request is due to the following reasons. Number one, by approving the proposal and ordinance as presented, the Commission is setting the stage for possible future divergent developments with respect to policies, management decisions, and operations concerning Hickory Hills. Number 2, with all due respect to the city manager's proposal, the Hickory Hills and Brown Bridge situations are not fully analogous. The Brown Bridge area is not staffed with city personnel on a continuous basis. Staffing, financial, and other operating decisions made at Hickory Hills affect operations in over 30 other parks in Traverse City. Number 3, the proposed ordinance includes appointing a member of the City Commission to serve on the Hickory Hills Advisory Committee. The present makeup of the Parks and Recreation Commission does not include a representative from the City Commission. The implied message to the members of the Parks and Recreation Commission is the proposed Hickory Hills Advisory Committee is taking precedence over the Parks and Recreation Commission. And number 4, there has been no consultation with or notice to the Parks and Recreation Commission about the proposed ordinance by the city manager's office. For these reasons and others I'm not able to detail due to my limited comment time, I again request any action on this proposal and the ordinance be postponed until the aforementioned meeting can take place. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments on this item? I'm going to bring it back and remind everyone that this is for introduction and possible enactment on September 3rd. This is not the final. If there's more voices that, I know City Manager Vogel is engaged with many of the stakeholders to come to this conclusion, that there's certainly time for others to reach out and communicate as well. But this is originally, the committee itself was a self-selected by the city manager and not formally. So this is why we would be formalizing this more like the Brown Bridge, for some context on that. So it was
Yeah,
invitation only.
if it's okay and I'm certainly happy to take a meeting. There was a Hickory Hills Advisory Committee in the past. My understanding is it's been around for a number of years, and then it was perhaps dissolved or not dissolved, and that seemed to be an issue of contention. And so I thought bringing it back in a formal way, where it couldn't just arbitrarily be dissolved at any time by the city manager, would be appropriate to bring to this body. And again, I'm certainly happy to have a meeting with you, sir. And again, this was what arose out of that meeting. And so again, trying to manage a number of stakeholders in a transparent way with public meetings, with set agendas where anyone can attend. It's a public meeting. I felt that this was a good path forward, but I'm certainly happy to meet with anyone who has any concerns about how it might work.
Okay, with that, we've got a motion from Commissioner Shaw and second by Commissioner Stanley. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Roll call.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Stanley,
Yes.
Commissioner Shaw,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
No.
Mayor.
Yes, so that is passed, so we will return to our agenda on September 3rd, just so everyone is clear. We're not passing the actual formation. Okay, now I apologize, Commissioner Anderson, now item number 12.
Yes, thank you. If I could ask, does this proposal imply that our contract with GFL for DDA district garbage collection expired on June 30th? Are we currently acting without a contract? And then I'd also like to know the reasoning behind the 70-30 split of costs between DDA and city. And then finally, before we re-up for 3 years, is everybody happy with the GFL trash hauling services that have been provided to date? It seems to me I've been aware of some public feedback that indicated perhaps not.
Well, really quickly, Lauren, I think GFL has the contract for the entire city, not just the DDA.
That's correct. We have a single hauler ordinance in the city, so GFL is that hauler currently for the entire city.
But we are just considering right now a contract for their services within the DDA district? Isn't that what this is?
It's adding the schedule for the DDA district and the extra pickups and funding for that.
Right.
And yes, the contract did lapse.
Do you There was another
And
question there.
everyone's very satisfied with the services that have been provided in the downtown district to date?
I think we've had some hiccups, and I think that the moment we realize that's happening, our staff have been in contact with GFL, and they've been generally resolved to our satisfaction. So we're on top of it when we do get complaints, and then we relay those to the staff, and we try to figure out and manage those with the hauler.
Thank you.
And then if there were issues or concerns, we would have to consider citywide for the contract then.
We have a contract with them currently through,
I don't know when it ends,
I
but
think it's another year or two, right?
I couldn't say. We can find that information and get it to you, if you'd like to.
Wait, another contract for another year or two?
I
But then-
think we did a multi-year one a couple years ago is what I'm saying, which is vague, but it might have been a 5-year 3 years ago, it might have been a year or two ago.
Well, I would think it'd be at least 3 years if this one's 3 years.
No, probably, maybe that's it. I think, Harry, you addressed a little bit of this at the DDA as well. But did you guys, when you were all negotiating that, was this based on 3 years for payment, or was this based on 3 years based on our current contract with GFL? In other words, if we move providers from GFL in the meantime, this was meant to carry through 3 years?
It was just meant as a control measure for costs, and so that we can plan for the future, so we know what the incremental increases will be year over year for planning purposes.
But it does commit us to using GFL for 3 more years, yes?
It does, but my understanding, and maybe Lauren can chime in, is that this board typically reapproves multi-year contracts every year.
And also, our standard contracts all include a termination provision that they can be terminated at the interest of the city, more or less, at any time.
And so if we stopped using GFL as our provider, this contract would be written in such a way that whoever the new provider is who the DDA and the city would be in partnership for collection.
We can do it that way, and if services are terminated, the city would pay through the termination date, whatever has been performed until then.
I have a question. So GFL didn't pick up the recycling until almost 9 o'clock last week on our street. Most people had already hauled their buckets back. It would never occur to me to complain to the city about that. I would complain to GFL about that. Is there, I did see a note come in an email come in last week from somebody. Is there any quality control that the city is aware of as far as the public is concerned?
I've been made aware that typically in the past, the recycling truck would follow the garbage truck pretty closely.
They usually do.
And that hasn't been happening, so I have relayed that message to the staff, so I am inquiring on what the situation is from GFL's end, of, what's triggering that, and how we can rectify it.
But that doesn't really answer the question. So how do we know how do you know if the public is happy with the service?
Well, you're a member of the public as well as a commissioner. I think I've had two residents mention it, and in recent memory, like in the last week or two. And again, I'm new here, so I didn't know that there was a pattern. That would have been new information, but as soon as I received it, I passed it along. So I'm just I'm still waiting on the hauler to understand why they changed a past that everyone seemed to like, so I'm not sure why yet.
Go ahead. The issue that came up during the DDA discussion, or I shouldn't say issue, the question that came up during the DDA discussion was that the city will be the point for the complaints, so that then it won't be disseminated that maybe, Harry at DDA got a couple requests, and then another citizen downtown called, so that with the city controlling all of these, I think it's going to help with the awareness factor, and we're now having this public discussion, so the citizens probably can reach out to GFL, but you can also reach out to the city to let us know, and that is one way for us to gauge if there's issues or not. So, go ahead.
I'd like to propose that we contact GFL and ask them if they have received complaints from city residents. I know I placed a call to them when my recycling was picked up 4 days late.
Oh, wow.
Just a thought.
I
think
see
we've
Liz
just
typing an
doubled your
email as you're
reports.
talking.
Okay, so I guess this brings us back to the question of, GFL is a bigger question here, but this is about a payment and the contract with the DDA to pay the city for trash services. Do we have a motion? Or will the city continue to pay?
Go ahead, Mark, if you got it keyed up.
That's somebody moving. I move that the mayor and the city clerk execute an agreement with the Downtown Development Authority articulating it will pay for the cost sharing for waste hauling services in an amount not to exceed $240,428.79. Such contract subject as to its substance by the city manager and its form by the city attorney, and further that mayor and city clerk execute a contract amendment with GFL, previously American Waste, to extend the current agreement by 3 years for waste hauling services at various city-owned locations, including the Downtown Development District, in an amount not to exceed $351,027, which includes a 2% contingency from Parks and Recreation Fund 101-691. Such agreement subject to approval as to its substance by the city manager and its form by the city attorney, with the execution of such amendment subject to the city clerk's receipt of an executed agreement with the Downtown Development Authority articulating it will cover $240,428.79 of the total cost.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Shaw. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Wilson gets the award for tonight.
Three paragraphs.
Now, I just wanted to add, this is, because this has been going on for a while, this is an agreement for a larger amount than the DDA has paid in the past after long conversations about more of its fair share. And I guess I would say, given the conversation here, the form by the city attorney, that could potentially include the clause, if the city changes providers, so too shall this contract change with it. Okay, I'm getting a head nod from the city attorney that that would be included. Okay, any public comment on this item? Just 1 second. Seeing none, I'll bring it back. And Michelle, you had your hand up to as staff, not as public.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I just want to reassure the commission that I text a lot of people, but I text GFL a lot. So, and that doesn't mean they're doing a bad job. It means that I have direct communication with GFL multiple times a week and on the weekends, and they're very responsive. And if I don't talk to the route manager, I don't know his title, but I talk to his boss. So we have really good communication. I always get pictures from citizens in my email and texts from Harry. We have a really good way of communicating that. So I just want to reassure that over the last 2 years that we've been doing this, we have seen improvements in the garbage, and because it's critical to Parks and Recreation staff operations that this is approved and moves forward because of everything we've been able to do now that we don't do garbage. I want to make sure I answer all your questions because sure, some people are unhappy with GFL, but they have a really good communication right now of how we handle complaints, overflowing, seagulls getting into trash cans, what have you. So you have anything else for me on that? I talk about trash a lot, so anything you want to know. Thank you.
Any other questions for Michelle? Okay. All right, we have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Wilson, second by Commissioner Shaw. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. All right, and item number 13, please go ahead.
Thank you all for your patience. This is a simple one. Whether this space is meeting the standards of Traverse City's building electrification policy.
This is about cleaning, not about anything to the space. You had pulled 13, correct?
13 is the number 13. This is the old Scalawag space.
Oh, sorry, I apologize. I was reading the cleaning one. I apologize again. So that was the question being asked?
Yeah, so the request for bid went out about a week ago, and it does include under the intent that we are asking all bids to honor that policy, and it is attached, as attachment A. I did send a communication to the commission demonstrating that, so I'm sorry if there was any confusion.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have other questions or a motion?
I'll make the motion that the mayor and city clerk execute a five-year lease agreement, a 5-year lease with Malkiat Singh for retail space within the Larry C. Hardy parking structure at 303 East State Street, with the terms as outlined in the August 2nd, 2024 communication from the Transportation and Mobility Director, with such lease subject to approval as to its substance by the city manager and its form by the city attorney.
Thank you.
Second?
Thank you. Any other questions about this item? Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. All right. On to the new business, and just to give a heads up to everybody, I think I forgot to mention this at the top. State Representative Betsy Kofia has reached out to me before this meeting that she will be rescheduling, so the reserved comment at the end as we continue with the motion has been pulled for this week. But in the meantime, we will pick up the Division Street 12-inch water main line project. I don't know if, Liz or...
Thank you, Mayor. We have several staff who could speak to this project. We have our engineer, Ann Pagano, ready to answer questions.
And I'd be happy to give a brief summary if you'd like. I just wanted to mention, and a lot of this is in the memo from Art, who's not here this evening. This is a 12-inch water main lining project on Division from 14th Street to just south of Fitzhugh. This is a nearly 40-year-old cast iron water main that's in questionable shape. It's got damage due to corrosive soils, and there's very concerns in our municipal utilities group that this is an urgent repair that's needed right away. And this is a cost-effective alternative to pipe replacement, and it's a structurally rated liner, which basically can handle pressure up to 150 psi even without the host pipe. So it's a very strong liner, and this construction has less disruption to customers and a shorter construction time frame. And also has less impact to the environment versus an open cut trench when you're replacing the pipe. We also have a representative here from FERPAL, so if you have any questions about the process of the installation, we can answer those questions. Thanks.
Do we have any questions? Go ahead, Jackie.
I just wanted to verify, I know the construction period will be shorter than it would be with alternatives. Will it impact water availability for folks living in the Pines?
I don't think it's in that area.
Alex Shackey, Deputy City Engineer. It will not affect water service. I don't think there is water service to the Pines.
Water service.
Okay, that does it. Thank you.
All right, do we have any more questions or a motion?
I'll move that the mayor and city clerk execute an agreement with Hubble, Roth, and Clark in the amount not to exceed $74,300, which includes a 10% contingency for construction management services related to the Division Street 12-inch water main lining construction project, with such agreement subject to approval as to its substance by the city manager and its form by the city attorney, with funds available in the water fund, and further that the competitive bidding process be waived, and that the mayor and city clerk execute an agreement with FERPAL Construction USA LLC in the not to exceed amount of $1,750,000, which includes a 10% contingency, with such agreement subject to approval as to its substance by the city manager and its form by the city attorney, with funds available in the water fund.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Shaw.
Second.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Anderson. Any other questions on this item or comments? Seeing none, any public comment on this item? Seeing none, bring it back. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. All right, we'll move on to the pilot at 10200 Carter Road, or however we're choosing to say it at the moment. And I will hand that off to Liz and Deb.
Hi, yes, we have Assistant City Manager Deb Allen here, who has been spearheading and leading the pilot application process. So thank you for being here tonight to answer any questions.
Sure. We also have representative from the Traverse City Housing Commission to answer any of your questions. I did include in your packet two documents, one being a pilot checklist that we initiated to review all the pilot questionnaires, seeing that our resident experts have weighed in on this, and then the scoring sheet that you have is kind of the culmination of that. I know we've talked about some of these issues this evening, so are there any questions we have?
I just wanted to put on the record, because Commissioner Warner could not be here, he sent an email asking why this was ignoring our electrification policy, but I did want to point out that the electrification policy that was finally passed made allowances for projects that could be approved without it applying. The example that was given at the time, and I know Commissioner Stanley, Mayor Pro Tem Wilson were on the commission at the time, was affordable housing can't always be built with heat pumps up here right now. And we even had Craig Patterson of WODA Group talking about experiences he'd had in Kentucky with issues with affordable housing, getting enough heat from a heat pump. So I would just point out that Commissioner Warner did raise that point about our policy, but the policy was finally passed with the caveat that there would be allowances to not have electrification if the housing, or if the project was deemed worthy or not able to be, and in the discussion itself, affordable housing was brought up specifically. So I just wanted to throw that in there, because there have been some emails and some discussion, and I didn't want to leave out that portion of the conversation as we start the conversation.
So am I to understand then that the new construction at Orchard View will not necessarily abide by the
Yeah, I think. Hi, Elisa Korn, Deputy
electrification?
Director.
Thank you.
So the Orchard View project we are applying for is a two-part project. The first part is we are going to renovate 21 existing units, which are 3 and 4 bedroom townhomes. The second part is new construction of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. The new construction of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments is completely electrified, following step by step by your policy. It also includes electric car charging stations, as well as that's part of our MSHDA tax credit. What we do have in the existing 3 and 4 bedroom townhomes, which are pretty large units, to be honest with you, they're pretty big. We do not have plans to change the existing heat systems that are in it right now, because that would be cost prohibitive for us to keep that in an affordable manner, particularly with 3 and 4 bedroom townhomes. However, the new builds are all following the city policy that's now in place at this time. So,
Thank you.
clearing that up. Yep.
Were there any other questions or comments before, or a motion, if people don't have any?
I'd be happy to make the recommendation that the resolution granting tax exemption for the property at 10200 East Carter Road, Traverse City, Michigan, 49684 be developed by the Traverse City Housing Commission with a 4% pilot arrangement for a term of 45 years be adopted. Special request to waive the $2,300 required pilot application fee in light of the extension of this previously approved pilot project.
That's the old motion?
I'm
is
in
that-
the wrong place?
Well, is that close enough, or can we amend it quickly, or do we need to restart over?
I guess the clarification is, are you making the motion to do both
I'm
items?
making the motion to do both, although I am going to go look at that property, which I didn't do, I'm sorry, and make sure that that slope is really
This
prohibitive.
is
of
an
more
open
building.
invitation for any of you to visit the Traverse City Housing Commission office. We're 4 blocks from you. I'm here all the time. Honestly, I'm happy to go over. We have a lot of projects and programs that I don't think any of you probably are aware of. For instance, we run the Housing Choice Voucher in a 6-county region. We have senior, disabled, family properties. I run the Family Self-Sufficiency Program. There's a lot that I would love to share with you that we do that might help you make some of these decisions in the future, make them a little bit easier. But I'd love for you to check out Orchard View. It is a gorgeous piece of property. I mean, a super quick walk to the beach, the Chart Trail's right there. It's just really a great piece of property, and I'm super excited to see it finally come to its fruition that we had envisioned 30 years ago. So,
Thank
yeah.
you for your great work.
Well, thank you guys for all of your help, but honestly, you really can reach out to me anytime. I would love to.
Thank
Sure.
you, for sure. Does that motion work then? though? Okay, and then do we have a second for that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Stanley. Okay, any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Jackie.
I wanted to thank the person responsible for having some data and some numbers about the value of the pilot arrangement. And I'd like to be sure that I'm interpreting it correctly. So I see in the spreadsheet that we've got, sort of column A, column B, column C, the first one being our current pilot tax amount for the 21 or 22 existing units, and that's around $9,000 taxes paid per year. And then with the addition of the new 1 and 2 bedroom units, it looks like that would be going up to about $27,000 a year without the pilot arrangement. Help me out here.
That number was actually taken right from the application.
Okay.
Which is in your packet. There's the spreadsheet where they have the projected rents.
Yes.
So that is taken from the developer. Yeah.
Okay, so am I correct that with the newly expanded Orchard View, that the property taxes paid net of the I don't even know if
So
you
right now it's
consider them
paid
to be
based on
pilot
the
amount
rents. So the rents are less units now. So with the build out, they'll have more rents because there'll be more units. So that's why that amount is greater.
Okay, great. And then the third column was showing an unpiloted value
Correct.
of property taxes. And was that for the existing units?
That is
or
for the current
expanded?
2024 taxable value. So that does not take into any effect any development
Okay,
that would come through.
great. So, and these are just annual numbers, correct? Per
That
1
is,
year?
they're going to change every year, obviously, depending on
Mhm.
rents.
Right.
But yeah, that, the 9,000 number is the one that we got paid this year. And
Got
then
it.
the calculation was provided for
Okay.
this year,
And
or next year.
And the terms of the current pilot are what
I believe it's
percentage of
10%
rents?
is what you're proposing, or 4?
We're proposing a 4%
Right,
pilot.
but what, you have a pilot currently on the existing units?
We do. So just a quick explanation. Currently, that property is what we call public housing. I'm part of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and they are getting out of the public housing business. It's a difficult way to have sustainable housing solely reliant upon the government funding. So we are entering into these kind of transitions. There's 2 different types. We have RAD, Rental Assistance Demonstration, or Section 18, which is what we're doing here, which is a way to take a public housing property and put it back on the rent rolls. So basically, right now, the 21 tenants that are there pay 30% of their adjusted gross income, which could be 0, right? Because if you make 0, 30% of 0 is 0. And our pilot payment to the city every year is based on a percentage of those rents. So the units themselves don't have a per se value. It could be anywhere from 0 to, I think our max right now is about 1,300. When you have this transition and you go into the type of development that we are proposing, we then have rents on the units. Now, some of our residents in the original 21 units will have project-based vouchers, and they will continue to pay 30% of their income, but we will kick in the rest through U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development up to a fair market rent value for the units. So just simple math is going to tell you if you're taking a percentage of the rents and now you're not basing it on people's income, but basing it on a fair market rent, all of a sudden you've got that. Now double the amount of units that you get there, and you can see where that ability is there. And also one thing we should point out is that while we are targeting 60% and under of area median income, the new 1 and 2 bedroom apartments are fully eligible for people with housing choice vouchers to use. So therefore, you could open up to a market of much wider people to be able to afford them by using their housing choice voucher, which would then create 30% of adjusted gross income on those tax credit units as well. But when you add all of that together, we still get to base it on that fair market rent, therefore higher taxes paid in the pilot with the city. So it's really a much more sustainable way to reinvest. This redevelopment of Orchard View, what we're doing to renovate it, would not be possible under the public housing model. Our capital funds just aren't that large from Congress. So therefore, this allows us that ability to have that private sector development and investment into it, and therefore give our residents their first kitchen upgrade in 35 years. So it'll be great.
And my question surrounds revenues to the city.
Absolutely
So,
increased revenues for the city. There is no doubt about it.
But let me just continue that question if I could. So the current percentage of rents that you pay in lieu of property taxes, what is that on those existing units?
Well, it's what we had talked about. Was it 8 or 9? Yeah, $9,000. So again, it's a percentage of income-based rents in a public housing property.
What percentage of rents do you pay
On
now?
my current pilot, what do I have? I think it's 10, isn't it? I think it's 10.
Okay.
You'll have to
Thank
bear
you.
with me, we have multiple properties, but I believe it is, and traditionally it is. So you're looking at a pretty significant increase when you throw in that FMR to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm kind of looking at what would the, without pilot property tax revenue possibly be? And I don't want to misuse your numbers, but if you take what's here and extend it just straight line for 45 years, we're talking like anywhere from $1 million to $3 million? Is that right?
You're talking about 45 years worth of taxes?
Yeah.
Oh,
I
well,
mean, I'm just for the agreement that we're voting on.
So which column on the spreadsheet are you
Well,
looking at?
let's take, for instance, if you take the 76,503 tax without the pilot, and that's on the existing scale development.
Correct, but the pilot is already in place, so you would have, in order to get that revenue at any point in time, the current pilot would have to
to
go
expire.
away.
And does it have an expiration date?
I believe, I'm trying to think about that. It's a long ways away.
Yeah.
But
Okay, okay.
this particular pilot was granted, and then I would have to look that up, because we had the conditional issue with the deed, so I'm not sure, to be honest with you. That would be one I would be happy to get back to you on.
Okay.
But this particular pilot we're requesting tonight, the 4% is a 45-year pilot.
Right, I got
Yeah,
that.
I will
I
definitely
understood
not be
that.
here
And
for that.
all I'm trying to do
Yeah.
is figure out over 45 years, just, straight lining it, what benefit is the city giving in terms of lost?
Oh, as far as lost
tax
revenue,
revenue.
you mean,
Yeah.
versus taxes? Okay.
Yeah.
I would say it's a significant benefit that's granted to housing
Yeah, I
developments.
mean, it looked to me like, depending upon what amount you used as a baseline, it could be $1 million over 45 years, or it could be $3 million over 45 years.
And I'll just highlight, this breaks it down by millage, so what the city is actually giving up is only the
Thank you. Good
rows
point.
that are city millage.
Good
And
point.
I did not put the fire in here. I did it quickly today, so, but that would be in there as well.
Okay. Well, again, I really appreciate having some sense of the scope, and maybe we can even refine our process to look a little bit more long-term next time.
Yep, I can.
Because I don't want to mess up your numbers.
Modifying my spreadsheets as we go, so.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I forgot, did I open it for public comment yet? I have Shaw and Stanley made the motion, correct? Okay. I'll open this item up for public comment right now.
John Stimson with Homestretch Nonprofit Housing Corporation. I'm in favor of this pilot request, but for pilots, there would be maybe hardly any affordable housing brought to the city. And when I mean affordable, I mean 60% AMI and less. So anybody with 80% to 120%, they should get a pilot, but nothing as aggressive as this project, which is 60% AMI and less. I would have rather seen one more point on the scoring, 5 out of 5 for the AMI. But you're still within the 15 to 20% excellent rating. The costs that they've portrayed, I can read pro formas all day long, same one I use. The costs are in line, and the PUD portion, I don't think affordable housing does use PUDs very often, but we've used them in 2 instances. One in rural setting, the Village of Honor, one in Sutton's Bay. It was the only alternative. It's a good use of zoning, but you know, maybe another alternative would be to put a deed restriction and say maximum 51 units. I don't know if that's permissible, but it's just a thought. 100% electric on the new builds makes sense. The remodeling of and putting electrification in remodeled units is very cost prohibitive and probably not wise. I would give it a 0% pilot. I have 2 of them right now. Well, I'm just trying to paint the picture that most cities and municipalities, they want this affordable housing. They want it at this level. So the Village of Elk Rapids gave us 0% on 24 units. The City of Frankfurt gave us 0%. I know it's somewhat unprecedented, but we need affordable housing. This is the night to do it. I would say pass it, please. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
All right.
Any other public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. Go ahead, Mai.
So, you know, I appreciate the robust conversation around the long-term costs to our community of offering a pilot. Earlier this evening, we heard that it costs $2.45 million a year to maintain 70 chronically homeless individuals. And so even if this is $3 million over 45 years, that's just slightly more than the cost of a single year of maintaining 70 chronically homeless people in our community who, since it's 60% AMI or lower, could theoretically be people who are housed in these units. So I think this is a very clear win for our community if we're able to support this at the city commission level, and has long-term impact on those very costly services that go into maintaining an unsheltered population the size of which we're seeing in our community right now. So thank you for bringing this forward to us.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you all for that as we continue to
Thank you so much.
start making up that gap. Thank you, Alyssa. That we could do a little bit more on some property that's already has some folks housed there as well. So I will hand this now to item 3 for the I forget what they're called now, the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund, for Ms. Vogel to proceed, please.
Thank you. Last agenda item attached, and we do have Director of Public Services Frank Tuturi here to answer any questions. This would be officially accepting the $300,000 grant from the state of Michigan National Resources Trust Fund, or NRTF, for river access amenities at Fish Pass project. And it's an exciting time in the world of Fish Pass. So if Frank, if you'd like to make some comments, if I may offer. Or?
Sure. I was going to say, yeah. Go ahead, Frank.
Just the comments I'd like to make is that we already are because of some delays, and the administrative grant process was waiting for construction to begin before we could establish a timeline to go through the processes that they needed for the city to accept the money. Process, I think May 24, somewhere around there, was our first day of construction on the project. we are where we are because of delays, and we're now in a place where we can accept that money, and then shortly thereafter apply for extensions. The trust fund gives essentially one-year extensions as they move funds from year to year. We've had considerable conversations with new grant administrator from the Michigan Department of Natural Resource Trust Fund just recently, as last week, and we're just looking to move this forward so we can accept the funds and build the things that you see in your packet as soon as possible.
Great. Any questions for Frank, who's up here? Go ahead, Jackie.
I wondered, am I correct that all of the amenities that are in this package and covered by this grant are going to be on the southern bank of the Boardman, which is on the easement that was granted by River's Edge condominiums? And this doesn't cover those on the north side and the overlook and balcony and all such. It's the kayak launch, input, intake, whatever. These are along the area of the river bordered by River's Edge condominiums, yes?
Actually, I think this is for access throughout the entire piece of property. Dan Zielinski, the engineer from the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, is here, and really these items were chosen to provide the best access throughout the whole project. So it does include particulars like the kayak slide, but it also includes ability to access the project and the water. I don't have the list right in front of me, but I could probably pick out if they were all on the south side. In general, it was made to allow for public access on the property.
Okay. Have we, are we comfortable that this is close enough to the expectations that were discussed with that homeowners association when the easement was granted, 4.5 years ago? Has anything changed? Will there be any surprises for them? Do you feel confident that they're still supportive?
Extremely confident. I think the project is moving forward in the ways we had hoped. We have open communication with all the adjacent properties, the church and the condo folks, and nothing has changed in the plans that were originally submitted and approved, and they had a chance to comment on through public comment, and we reached out on several occasions personally to meet with their boards. Nothing has changed with any of the plans that would be affected by any of this. Essentially, these are the things that were brought forward through the public comment period, through public input, and I haven't heard anything to the contrary, and I'm looking forward to moving forward with these parts of the project. It's still going to be a few years before we get to these pieces. That's why we need to get this done so we can get to the extensions. A lot of the this will be a lot of that final work, the things that allow people access to property.
Couple of real quick things. When was our last communication with that homeowners association?
It's open and constant, but Dan, if you'd like to address that, sure.
Yeah, as mentioned, I'm Dan Zielinski, Principal Engineer with the Great Lakes Fishery Commission. Yeah, we have open conversations with the homeowners association, so I think the last communication I had with them was probably about a week ago. So they've been fully abreast of the project. We had a partnering meeting at the start of construction back in either the end of May or early June, where representatives from all the neighboring properties were able to come in and kind of refresh the memory of the project and ask questions as they came up, and so everybody's well aware of what's going on, and all these aspects are the same ones that were as part of the original plans.
That's great to hear. And the easement that was granted, is that going to need a renewal, or how will that work?
Warren?
The easement is good until construction is finished. There are 2 easements per property owner that are adjacent. There's a temporary construction easement that runs until construction is done, and then there are permanent easements for the fixtures that will remain.
Oh, I thought the language said that it was either 5 years from the date of recording the easement or end of construction.
Whichever is later.
came sooner.
Whichever is later.
I'll send you what I have.
Okay.
Thank you. Great. That answered my questions. Thank you.
Do we have other questions or a motion at this time?
I will do it again.
Yep, thank you.
Also,
You're the Johnny on the spot.
I move that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to execute the necessary documents to officially accept the State of Michigan Department of Natural Resources Trust Fund grant in the amount of $300,000. Such documents subject as to its substance by the city manager and its form by the city attorney, and further, that the city commission authorizes a budget amendment for the receipt of the funds.
Thank you. Thank you. And any other questions on this item or comments right now? Seeing none, any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Glad to keep seeing Fish Pass continue to move forward. So at this time, we will now move on to general public comment. So if anybody has anything they want to say about anything, not just the items we have covered tonight, though we have probably touched on everything that's happening in the city tonight, but please feel free to approach the podium. Go ahead.
Justin Reed, 630 Kaiser's Drive, Apartment 1B, Traverse City, Michigan. Last city commission meeting, there was talk about the curve on West Front Street, so where the planters are at. Has there been any talk about what's the difference between the crash ring between the guardrail and the planters? I know that the aesthetics of a guardrail doesn't look pretty at all. That's why I suggest maybe the Arts Commission paint the guardrail. I mean, with some neon reflective colors. I mean, at least if you crash in the guardrail, like saying, hey, you know what? It looked nice. And so, yeah, I think a crash rating would suffice to ask about, if we extend the planters, is there a difference between that crash and the guardrail crash? So thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Any other public comment at this time? All right. Seeing none, I'll go to our city attorney who has her hand up.
I'm going to correct myself. It does say whichever is sooner on the temporary easement, and the temporary easements, I refresh my memory, are not recorded. So that is why it goes till the end of construction.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
There we go. Thank you. All right, well, I'll bring it back. Any final comments from the commission? Seeing none, meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
So, the Brown Bridge Trust Fund
Hi, good, thanks.
is all about
Hi,
parks.
Sherry.